There we go. And mute everybody. Participants, mute all. Great. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
So, okay, we'll start with our invocations, as always. Then I'll show you what I have in fact, let me do that first, then we'll invoke. I decided to get a bit organized today. What do you know? I tend to just sort of, let the muses speak and let, surrender the mind to Ishvara, and whatever comes out, comes out. And usually stuff comes out, which is not coming from me. But today I got a little, decided to get organized. So the first thing, let's just deal with it philosophical, is the soul a part of Brahman? Is it Brahman? Or is it an eternal part? So the word for part in Sanskrit is amsa. Oh, no. So number one, first thing, why posit a subtle body? Why do we need a subtle body? Why can't we just have an Atman in a body? Why do we need a subtle body, like this sort of intermediary body? So if you're interested in one quick verse on that, I put that on number one only because it's first in chapter 2. And then we'll do, it's going to be a bit philosophical. It'll probably take us a good 45 minutes, maybe not, maybe half an hour. Is the soul a part of Brahman, or is it sort of in its ultimate nature? Is it actually Brahman? Is there no dualism at all? Okay, and then clearly this is an issue that divides the dualists and the non-dualists, or the qualified dualists. So let's just get that done. That was part of our, dharma for this workshop, so that you're aware of the options. Okay, and there you get your Advaita Vedanta of Shankara and the great Shivananda, and the Vishishtadvaita of Krishnamacharya. Then there's this one little verse on prana. We all do pranayama. So what is prana? What is prana? It's not on the list. When you look at the Sankhya chart, you don't have prana there. So what is it? So one verse doesn't tell us what it is, but anyway, there's a little verse on it. Then there are the topic number 4, that the subtle body accompanies the soul at the moment of death. It doesn't get discarded. Thought you might be interested in that. So we're jumping around now because we've only got 2 more sessions. The first 4 sessions were a little bit systematic. The first 3 where you were looking at the first 5 sutras, which of course, same as basically the first 4 sutras of yoga, everything's packed in there. But now we're jumping around. And then topic number 5, again, only 1 verse, so I'm hoping this won't take too much time. That karma accompanies the souls if they make it to the celestial realm, not liberation, celestial realm, and they come down, there's a little bit of token karma left over. Let's see what that looks like. And then I'm not going to do number 6, the difference between Brahman and the world. We can cycle back to that if we have time. Because again, I want there to be 1 or 2 sessions, and they're not just dense philosophy. Last session was dense kind of philosophical engagement with Buddhism, but there are some things which are interesting and not necessarily densely philosophical. So let's just keep 6 on hold, and we'll cycle back if we have time. Then number 7, well, who's overseeing karma? So what's the relationship between karma and Ishvara? A couple of nice verses there. And let's make sure, everybody remind me, Eleonora, that we must fit in half an hour. So by 7:30, what does the Vedanta Sutra say about meditation? We know what Patanjali says. Well, how is it framed in Vedanta Sutra? Interesting little verse, topic number 9, different kinds of karma. There's 3 different kinds of karma. They're mentioned in the Yoga Sutra in the commentaries. And we'll see what the Vedanta says about that. So that's what we've got on our little menu today. And let's start with our invocation. Okay? Does that sound cool? A little bit lighter, a little bit friskier than last time. And then the last session, and we can always add one, by the way, but the last session is going to be, what is liberation? So that's going to be 4:4, the last section in the entire Vedanta Sutra, because there's 4 chapters like Patanjali. Each chapter has 4 padas. So what is liberation? And then we'll do that. And then if we have a little bit of time next week, there's guides, like there's these celestial guides when the soul is kind of like it seems to be framed as literally traveling through the universe in some kind of a subtle body. And there are these guides. So it's not very well unpacked, but they have to do something with it because the Upanishads mention these guides. And remember, what is Vedanta really? Nothing other than clarification of the Upanishads. So something's in the Upanishad, the job of the Vedantins is to say something about it, just like if something's in the Old Testament, then rabbinic tradition has to say something about it. Something's in the New Testament, Christian theologians have got to somehow explain it. They're going to do something with it. Something's in the Quran. The Islamic theologians have to say something about it. That's the dharma of the theologian. So there are these guides in the Upanishads, so Vedanta has to do something with it. So we'll look at that if we have time next week, okay? But right now we're this week. So Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Te Namine. That's an invocation to Bhaktivedanta Swami. I've told you before, I never met him, but his books completely and utterly just opened up the whole spiritual universe for me. And I still listen to his lectures. I do asana, I listen to Prabhupada's lectures. Bhaktivedanta. I recommend his lectures, they're all free on YouTube, and I recommend his books. You make a distinction between Bhaktivedanta Swami and the movement that he left, the institution. When we make it, just as we make a distinction between Jesus Christ and institutions of Christianity, or we can make these distinctions. So that's an invocation. I never met him, but I feel he was my Guru Vartma Pradarshika, the one who points you on the way. I feel an eternal debt, and partly I do what I do because Bhaktivedanta Swami wanted all his disciples, anyone who felt that they got something from him, like pass it on. Basically, that's what it is, pass it on. So, and that's why I do what I do. Well, that's one reason anyway. Akanda mandalakaram yena vyaptam characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. So that's to my Diksha Guru, the main guru who gives you initiation into the lineage. That's Haridas Shastri, and he was a Baba, Vrindavan Baba, not a member of any institution. The Babas do not belong to any institution. But in the Gaudiya lineage, they do belong in lineages. So everybody has a lineage, well, not everybody, but the vast majority of spiritual practitioners in India, all the sadhus you see wandering around with their loincloths and their dreadlocks, they all are connected to lineages. And that's because they accept that truth is higher than their own minds can produce. Your own mind can produce great philosophy, like Kant or somebody, but you can never get truth through your mind, because the mind is a karmic form of entrapment, just like the body is. You can only do certain things with the body. You can only lift so many, even if you're a weightlifter, you can only lift so many pounds. You can only run so fast. You can only see so far. Your body is limited karmically, and the mind is too. It's limited to what the senses perceive, and then inferences that you make from it. And we call that philosophy and science, the inferences. So anyone that's just sane and honest can understand that the mind cannot deliver truth. It can deliver wonderful, insightful observations, but not ultimate truth. So therefore, that has to come from beyond. And therefore, that lineages then see themselves as transmitting truths from beyond. They're called Arparushaya in Sanskrit, beyond human construction. They're not constructed by the human mind. So therefore, Babas are also in lineages. So Haridas Shastri is my Diksha Guru, I guess is where I was going for that. So if any of you care to come to Vrindavan when I'm there, you will visit Haridas Shastri's Goshala. Mary's up there. She's been there. She's at the celestial realms up there. Mary Fleming. And she's been to the Goshala. I think maybe one or two of you have, others of you have too. And yeah, remember, Mary, we were at your house and we got a lot. It was a very, very interesting thing. Mary and I, we were doing a workshop, and we were, and it was whatever it was, and we decided to go for a japa walk. We went for a japa walk, and Mary's lived there for a million years, and she knows the woods inside out. But this particular night, we got hopelessly lost, and it was just the very time when my guru passed away in India. It was just coincidental, and that very. Because we didn't know till the next day, but we went back and we saw the time. It was exactly when we were wandering for 2 or 3 hours. We started to get mildly anxious because it was cold, and it was exactly that period. So that was an interesting little story. But anyway, so Haridas Shastri. Okay, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. That's Sri Chaitanya, who inaugurated the sort of sometimes called a Renaissance of Krishna in the 16th century, and especially in the north of the subcontinent. And that's where you get the chanting of the Krishna's name in public, comes from that 16th century tradition. And that's what I suppose, the Krishna tradition that Westerners came in contact with in the 60s in the counterculture, for better or worse. I don't know how. How would one evaluate? All right. So okay. What else? Okay. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu. Definitely for the better, my friends. Definitely for the better. How can chanting of Krishna's name ever be inauspicious? Hey Krishna. Institutions are institutions, and that's another thing. But the theology and the practices are beautiful, wonderful gifts, transcendental gifts. And if we don't fit in an institution, we'll take the gifts and run. Then go sit in your living room, sit in a corner, put some cushions down, and create your own sacred space. What's wrong with that? Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostate. In the Vrindavan tradition, it's very informal. Krishna Bhakti is very informal. There are 3 ways, like in French, you have tu and vous, right? In Italian, right? You have lei and tu and lei. So you have 2 ways of saying you, right? Not in Saxon. In Saxon, it's just like you or you. But in most language, you have a polite way and you have a sort of not polite way. In Hindi, you have 3. And one of them is super impolite. It's tu, not tum, but tu. And you use tu for children, dogs, and God. That's how intimate the Vrindavan tradition is with their Bhagavan Krishna. They give him tu, not even a tum. What to speak of? It should be aap. And then super polite is Bhavan in Sanskrit, and then and so forth. So, hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hare Priya. If we can get the grace of Radharani in the Vrindavan tradition, then Krishna will do anything Radha says. So therefore, it's all Radharani in the Vrindavan tradition. She controls Krishna. Finally, apavitra pavitruva, sarvavastha piva, ya smaret pundarikaksham, sa bhaya vyantara shuchihi. Okay, and remember, there's no class next Friday, but the one after. Next Friday, I'm flying out to see my daughter, and then so we're missing a Friday, okay? And then we meet again, and then you can decide if you want to do another session. I can fit one more in before I leave the country. And do think of coming to Vrindavan if you care to. I'll be there from I have mid-September definitely till like mid-December. So if you sort of half had it in mind, think about it. Right, ready now? We had a little frivolity there. Let's get back to work, Vedanta. Right, topic 7. We are Ramanuja Bhasha. Bhasha means commentary, right? Shri, it's called the Shri Bhasha. Ramanuja's lineage is called the Shri Vaishnava. There are 4 main Vaishnava lineages. Well, now there's about 7. But in the old days, there were, well, at least in the one of the Puranas, it says there's 4 lineages. And by the way, I made 2 mistakes in my last, I happened to listen to the last lecture. And the first sutra of the Brahma Sutra is not Atato Brahma Jignasu, because that's an adjective. It's Atato Brahma Jignasa. Sa form is the noun. So the inquiry, now the inquiry, Jignasa is a desiderative, it's a duplicated desiderative, a desiderative verb. So in English, we have to say, I desire to walk, I desire to eat. Whereas in Sanskrit, the very verb itself, you can do something to it, and it takes on a desiderative quality without having to add another word like we do in English. So it comes from gnya, like jnana. So it's reduplicated, so it becomes jignya, and then you put this ending on it. Jignasa is inquiry into Brahman. Jignasu is an adjective, one who is interested in knowing about Brahman. I've been saying Atato Brahma Jignasu. I got some weird samskara stuck in my head that is Jignasu. Number 1, mistake. Oh, there's probably millions, but it's awful listening to your own lectures. You're like, oh my God, did I say that? It's recorded forever. Domenica, can't you edit? Can't you edit? You can edit books. Can't you edit the videos? But the other thing is, I said there was a teleological problem, the problem of evil. You remember it, the problem of evil, right? If God is benevolent and omnipotent, omnipotent, benevolent, he wouldn't want there to be suffering, so he's benevolent, and omnipotent, he could do anything you want, including stop suffering. So that's that I said it was the teleological problem. It's a theodicy problem. The name in religion and philosophy for that problem is called the theodicy problem. I don't know why I said teleological. It sounds the same, but it doesn't matter. Okay, my friends, you ready for some Vedanta work? No Krishna Bhakti here, no rasa, no stealing butter. What are we going to do? Soul and Brahman. The soul is a part of the Lord, right? And the term here is anksha. You see that circle there? Anksha. So anksha means a part of something, a fraction, a splinter, a portion. So the soul is an anksha of Bhagavan on account of difference between the two being declared. It's declared. When it says being declared, what does that mean? Declared in the Upanishads. Remember that. Whenever there's any talk about declared, or they say, or some say, usually it's the Upanishads, unless it's an opposing school. So sometimes it's the soul is a part of the Lord on account of difference, and otherwise also. And sometimes it says in the Upanishad it's not different. How do you reconcile this? This is why there's all these schools, my friends, because the Upanishads are not consistent or systematic. In some sakas, which is a recension of Vedic texts, Brahman is spoken of as being fisherman, knave, etc. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that. Now, what's the question here? The question, okay, topic number 7 in chapter 3, the individual soul is a part of Brahman. Shankara's going to agree with this. But how is he going to agree with it? He can't disagree with it because it's right there in the text. What's he going to say? It's illusion. The partners of Brahman is an illusion. It's a superimposition. That's his way of reconciling the different. And when the Upanishads speak of the Atman is Brahman, then they're speaking from the highest position of ultimate knowledge. And when they speak of the Atman as being a part, which they do, a spark, then they're speaking from the perspective of Vyavaharika, which means illusory Maya reality, which is really unreal, like the mirage. Has everybody got a sense of Shankara? Please say yes. Otherwise, we have to do the whole 6 sessions all over again, and we're just going to read boring, dry Vedanta. Okay, say yes. Kind of. What is kind of? What do I do with kind of? All right. If it's kind of, we'll do 3. No, I'm kidding. All right. So let's see if we get a better sense of it today. Now, Here it is. Is the soul quite different from Brahman? Like in Christianity, Islam, Abrahamic traditions, there's God, there's the soul, and the world. It's quite different. I mean, obviously God supports, sustains, and in Christianity creates the soul. But this is still different, right? Is it quite different from Brahman, or is it Brahman under ignorance, right? Brahman is under ignorance. It thinks it's a soul, but when it becomes free of ignorance, it realizes that it is that Tattvamasi. It is that supreme Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. Is it that? Option number 2. Is it Brahman determined by a limited adjunct, which is pretty much the same as number 2, by the way? They're slight. So these last two are Advaita positions, but they were different. They were slightly different schools of Advaita. But Advaita would say it's Brahman under ignorance. So what happens when the ignorance is lifted? There's no more. The soul isn't a separate part anymore. It is Brahman. It always was Brahman. You might say it becomes, but really doesn't. But that's just rhetorical. But really, it doesn't become anything. It always was Brahman. So, or is it a part of Brahman, right? Which is what the Vaishnavas would say. It's the same in quality, because Brahman is Satchidananda, and the souls are Satchidananda, and Brahman is Paramatma, and the souls are Atman, and Ishvara is Parampurusha, and the soul is Purusha, but eternally distinct, and one is infinite, the other infinitesimal, like the sun and the sun ray. So different schools of thought hold different views. So that's why you have all the different traditions. One group holds the soul is quite different from Brahman, and there are Dvaitas. Ramanuja is a little bit in the middle, but there's Advaita, and then there's the opposite, Dvaita in your face, Dvaita dualism. Madhva, great philosopher of the 12th century. So one group holds that the soul is quite different from Brahman, and the relationship is like that between the master and the servant. Why? Because the scriptural texts declare their difference, and then he gives you these verses. Right? Remember, Vedanta is all about the Upanishads. All about the Upanishads. I'm going to keep repeating it. Everything in the Vedanta Sutras is nothing other than a discussion of some topic in the Upanishads. That's all Vedanta is. Yes, everybody. Vedanta is nothing other than a clarification of the Upanishads. Let's say it. Come on, you make me do downward dog every day. I have a right to make you repeat things. Upanishads are not, the Vedanta is nothing other than a clarification of the Upanishads, my friends. Okay, right. Back we go. So there are texts like the Shve, which is the Shvetashvatara, right? 1/6, and two birds of nice metaphor, two birds of beautiful plumage. Of these, one eats the fruit of the tree with relish. That's the Atman trying to enjoy the world of Bhoga. Remember, Patanjali says, why is the world there? The Drisha, Bhoga Pavarga. It said, try to enjoy as long as you think you'll find happiness. And when you fail in some birth or another, right? After infinite births, eventually we realize there is no happiness. I cannot find my ultimate bliss. I can only find these temporary Ben and Jerry Kodak moments. When we finally realize, so one eats the fruit of the tree, right? The fruit, the phala, which is the word that Krishna uses in the Gita for, karma. When you karma yoga, you have to give up the phala, the fruit. You have to give up the fruit. So one eats the fruits of the tree with relish, while the other looks on without eating. That's the Lord. And a bit like the guardian angel, actually, because there's a form of Bhagavan that accompanies us in Vaishnavism. Do they have anything like that in Islam, Pasha? Is there like is there like some kind of a divine presence, like a guardian angel in Catholicism anyway, and the Paramatma in Vaishnavism? Does Islam have any individual? Each individual has their own. I'm not talking about a cosmic God overseeing everything and knowing everything. I'm talking about a specific manifestation of God that accompanies each and every Atman. Is there anything like that in Islam that you know of? Yeah, there is. Okay, good. We'll talk about it some other time. Okay, so there's your garden. There. Okay, but okay, right. So there are two birds, and one of these eats a fruit, and the other looks on without eating, is waiting for the other bird to turn to it. My friends, God is waiting for us. Ishvara Bhagavan is waiting for us to turn to him. There are two, one the knowing, the Lord, Ishvara, the other ignorant, the soul, the master and the servant. So this is what one group says, and they read that verse. They read the Shveta in that way. And they're both unborn, they're both eternal, they are both eternal in their ultimate essence. In these texts, the difference between the two is declared by the scriptures. Remember, if you're a Vedantin, what do you have to do? Every time you make a claim, what do you have to do? Back it up with a verse from the Upanishads. You can't just make claims. Why do you think you're all reading the Yoga Sutras? Because Krishnamacharya is doing asana, and the Brahmins are saying, what the heck are you doing all this bodily stuff for? Where is it in the Shastra? Where is it in the Shastra? It's not in the Veda. It's not in the Upanishad. So therefore, the Yoga Sutras has 3 verses on asana. So this is the way of tradition, my friends. This is what tradition means. That if you just want to make your own stuff up, fine, go off and make your own religion, like the Buddha, or like Rajneesh, or like Krishnamurti. Then you do that, but then you don't call yourself a Vedika. If you're going to call yourself a Vedika, you have to be grounded. Make up some story, find some way, find some verse, find anything, find a peg in the Upanishads upon which you can hang your whole system. This is what it means to be Vaidika, right? Where's Kundalini? Where's all that in the Upanishad? 1 verse, my friends, that talks about nadis, and so on and so forth. But that's all you need, 1 verse. Then it's like a peg. I call it a peg, a really well-made peg that you can hang a whole system on. And then later schools are going to say that peg is the bija, the seed, and their tradition are developing the seed and manifest. You can say that, that's fine. You got to find a seed. You got to find a peg. All right. So in these texts, right, 2 birds in the tree, Shveta, the difference between the two is declared by the scripture, showing that the relation between the two is like that between the master and the servant, the ruler and the ruled. Although the 2 birds one is more like the friend, because God is the friend. The other bird is is just waiting, kindly and mercifully and gracefully. Even while the first bird is making a fool of itself, gorging itself incessantly on the fruit of the tree and never content, the other bird is just waiting patiently until the first bird gets exhausted with failure at finding its bliss. So it's more, the metaphor to me anyway is more like the friend, but it doesn't matter. Ramanuja says it's like the master and the servant, the ruler and the ruled. The Lord is not subject to karma. Never. What does Patanjali say about Ishvara? Karma klesha samaya anavichinnaha. No, he says Purusha vishesha klesha karma samaya anavichinnaha. He's a special soul in many ways, but the first way he chooses to mention Patanjali in the sutras is klesha karma samaya anavichinnaha, never affected by kleshas and karma. Well, here it is. The Lord is not subject to karma, while the soul is subject to karma, my friends. We're subject to karma. Why do we think, by what madness do we think we're God? Well, what kind of Maya is that? Why, if we're God, why are we trapped in Maya? I mean, it's such a simple question. And then we ask a simple question. If we are Bhagavan, first of all, we should be able to, we have, the proof of that is to create a universe. Bang, create a universe. That's the definition of Ishvara. That's what distinguishes Ishvara from an amazing Siddha. Siddhas can do amazing things. Patanjali is going to say Siddhas are omniscient and omnipotent only within a universe. They cannot create the universe. That's the definition of Ishvara. Ishvara is that being with the most power. Think of Anselm, right? No, think of Augustine, perfect being theology, right? Has anybody heard of perfect being theology in Christianity? A perfect being. So what is the definition? Okay, so everybody has power. What does it mean to be omnipotent, right? Everybody has some potency, and siddhas can do amazing things within the universe. They cannot create a universe. Only Bhagavan can do that. So why do we think, oh, well, all right, doesn't matter. I'm going off on one of my little rants again. Right, so this is one group. They see the relationship as the Lord and the ruled. The Lord is not subject to karma, while the soul is subject to karma, enjoys and suffers the result of it. The text now, right? Now, the texts which declare the non-difference, because Some texts declare there's a difference, and he gives an example, the two birds in the tree. But what about the texts that declare non-difference, like the ones about the rivers going down to the ocean and merging into the ocean, right? The most famous verses in the Upanishads, in the Chandogya, and that's where you get your famous Tattvamasi from, and the honey, drawn from different flowers. But when the bees go to the hive, it all gets merged into one homogeneous, what is the word? Homogeneous, help me somebody. One sort of undifferentiated nectar. So then what do you do with those verses? The texts which declare the non-difference between the two are to be taken in a secondary sense, or as eulogy. They're not to be taken literally. How do you reconcile conflicting texts, conflicting statements in scripture, my friends? One of the, and this goes for Christianity or any tradition. One way is to say whatever verses favors your position, you take them literally, and whatever doesn't, you say, oh, well, they're just allegory, they're metaphoric, they're not to be taken literally. This is standard. In Christianity, it's Philo that introduces this into biblical. What do you do with the God of the Old Testament, who has ears and nose and walks around the Garden of Eden and speaks to people and reaches out and gets angry and genocidal? What do you do with that? Well, Philo said, oh, these are all just allegories, not to be. God is not really, does not really have a form, doesn't have eyes. All right, so he introduced that. So therefore there's a conflict. When there's a conflict, then one way of resolving it is to assign literal, to read certain statements. One side of the conflict, you take it literally, and the other side, the verses that oppose that, you take it symbolically. And that's what he's doing here. Ramanuja is doing exactly that. The texts which declare the non-difference, according to the first group, between the two, that there's no difference between Atman and Brahman, are to be taken in a secondary sense, not literally, or as eulogy. Right, that's group number one, dualists. Number two, another group holds that the soul is Brahman under ignorance. It is non-different from Brahman, but Brahman is under ignorance. And the two are non-different. And now this position is based on a different set of texts. Like what? The Chandogya, Tattvamasi, you are that, thou art, Chandogya, and the Brihad, this soul, Atman, is Brahman. Sa Atman, Brahman, right? Brahma, Brihadaranyaka 445. Right? So what does this group do? What does the second group do with the texts that speak about difference? The texts which declare difference between the two are but repetitions of what we commonly experience through other means of knowledge, and as such carry no weight. In other words, this Advaita group, the group that sees non-difference, when they're challenged by the dualists and say, well, hey, hang on a minute, there's these other verses that talk about dualism, then the Advaita would say, well, the text would talk about dualism or what you perceive in normal reality. And the texts are then, they come down to a kind of mundane, normal, pratyaksha, sense perception, but ultimate truth is beyond that. So that's how they deal with it. That's one way of dealing with it. Right. So the texts which declare non-difference, Advaita, Dva means difference, dual, means non. So the translation of non-difference in Sanskrit is Advaita. So the Advaitins say, the followers of Advaita, the texts which declare non-difference gives us a knowledge which is not known through other sources. Are you clear? So what do the Advaitins say? They say the verses in the Upanishads that speak of difference, they're speaking about what you see with your senses. You see difference. A tree is different from a bush, right? A table is different from a chair. I'm different from you. So it's speaking about mundane perspective. So when the texts talk about difference, they're coming down to our normal frame of reference. When they speak of non-difference, they're taking us to what we can't see with our senses, therefore to a higher truth. So it's an interesting way of dealing with these conflicting statements. Are we all clear? Do you get a sense of why there's different schools in the first place, my friends? Because you're going to you're going to find a peg to hang your whole lineage on that works for you. If you're a dualist, you're going to give primary attention to the dualistic statements of the Upanishads, and you're going to say they must be taken literally, and non-dual verses have to be taken in a secondary sense, or metaphoric sense, or some other kind of sense. You're going to put your whole lineage on that peg. If you're a non-dualist, you're going to hang your whole system on the non-dualistic verses, that you are that Brahman, and your whole lineage is that, and you're going to quote those verses. They're going to be your Mahavakyas, your great sayings. A Mahavakya is a great saying. So the different schools have their great sayings. There's usually 3 or 4. You can't have too many of them. And 3 or 4. So for Shankara, it's Tattvamasi, one of the 4. You are that. And for Ramanuja, it's a different one. The one became many. He likes the many. He likes the idea of manifoldness. Okay, these are called Mahavakyas, where there's a short, pithy phrase that encapsulates the core of a tradition. If we had to think about a Mahavakya for Christianity, we might say something like this: love thy neighbor. That's it. 3 words. And it captures so much. Or turn the other cheek. Bang, that's it. 4 words. Mahavakya, by definition, has to be 3 or 4 words. So if you were looking in Christianity, they would be good choices for Mahavakya. Do unto others. That's all you need to say. Do unto others, and a massive theology of compassion and kindness, and everyone is a child of God. All of that is embedded into these 3 or 4 words. So that's what a Mahavakya. Maha means great, Vakya means saying, a great statement. Okay, so Shankara has his Mahavakyas and Ramanuja has his, and obviously they're different because their theologies are different, and they've all come from the Upanishads. Isn't it interesting? Okay, right now. So for the Advaitins, the non-dualists, these texts which declare non-difference are more authoritative. For the scriptures are to give us knowledge which is not had through other sources of knowledge. The Advaitins say, we don't need the scriptures to tell us about dualism. We can just walk out the door and see dualism. Our senses will give us information about dualism. We don't have to read scripture. Scriptures, and this is true, the Vedantins at the beginning, they say, scripture is only relevant for things that are not known by the senses. We don't need scriptures to tell us how to make, a cup of tea. So therefore, the scriptures are revelations of things inaccessible to senses and reason, which piggybacks on the perceptions of the senses. So the Advaitins say, we should take the non-dual statements as more authoritative because that's what scripture's for, to give us things we can't see by the senses, but we can see dualism by the senses. So they hold that the soul cannot be a part of Brahman, the Advaitins, the second group, for a part is possible only in a thing which is divisible, but Brahman is indivisible, and as such cannot have a part. Are we clear about the argument? The Advaitins say, if you say the soul is a part of Brahman, well, anything that has parts, what? You can take the parts away, and then what? That thing that doesn't exist anymore. It's broken up. So if you want to say Brahman is eternal, well, nothing eternal can have parts, because anything that has parts is potentially breakable into parts. If I have a table, I can't say the table is eternal because I can take the legs off. Or the famous example of Nagarjuna, not Nagarjuna, the teachings to King Milinda by the Buddhist, forget his name. And he says, well, what's a chariot? Oh, is there such a thing as a chariot? Well, you pull it apart. Now you've got 2 wheels, a spoke, and a body. Now what do you want to call it? Oh, well, 2 wheels and a spoke. All right, break the wheels up then into their bits. Now what are you going to call it? So that you can keep doing that. But clearly the chariot can't be eternal because it has parts. You see the thing. So therefore the Advaitin says, if the dualists say that the soul is a part of God, well then God has parts, and if he has parts, you can break him up. Right. Okay, now a third group. And they're pretty much the same as the second group, because both of these are applicable, at least they're applicable to Shankara. But there were different Advaita traditions. It wasn't all, even after Shankara, there were different Advaita traditions that stressed things differently. A third group holds that the soul is nothing but Brahman as determined by an upadhi. An upadhi is a limiting adjunct. What is a limiting adjunct? it's something that limits. So if I have a body, it's limit. My consciousness is eternal and infinite and potentially pervade the whole universe, but it's limited by this body. So the body is an adjunct, and it's called an upadi. There can be mental upadis like, I think I'm a professor. I think I'm black. I think I'm white. I think I'm a yogi is an upadi. So anything that in any way delimits consciousness is an upadi. An upadi, it's something that's placed over something else. So a light shade is an upadi over the bulb. I don't know if it's a good example, but anyway, so upadis are physical, the actual body itself, and they're also kind of like egos. I think I'm this, I think I'm that. Those are upadis. Anything which sort of limits and sits upon what's ultimately infinite, eternal, all-pervading consciousness is an upadi. It's a big term. It's used in Buddhism as well. So you might want to make a note of the word upadi. It's two words, upa, the prefix, and di. Upa means upon, actually. It can mean upon, amongst other things. So let's get rid of that and get back to our text. Sorry, get rid of this, close. All right, so that's the third group that, it's pretty much the same, because upadi is ignorance. It's not clear to me what the difference is between these two groups, but we'd have to read the larger version, but there are subtle differences between Advaita traditions. We don't need to worry about that. That's the third group. Now, as against all these views, right? So now these are all the three Purvapakshas for Ramanuja. The sutra says that the soul is a part of Brahman, since there is a declaration of difference and also of unity in the scripture. So this business here, he's spoken of as being a fisherman and knave. Go back to the verse, right? What does that mean? That the one Brahman is broken up into Atmans, which then take births as, fishermen, knaves, or anything else, dogs, cats, trees. He just mentions fisherman's knave. I don't know why. Right. So the view that the two are absolutely different, now you get Ramanuja's position. This is what he thinks the text means. The text is written by Vyas, Badarayana, also known as Vyas. This is what he thinks it means. Because Ramanuja is not a hardcore dualist. He is a dualist, but he wants to say the soul is different from Brahman, but inseparable. So it's it's Vishishta. It's one and difference. It's differentiated Brahman, and that's the name of his school. So Ramanuja says the view number one, that the two are absolutely different, cannot stand, right, in face of texts which declare non-difference. He's acknowledging, well, we can't say they're absolutely different, because what are we going to do with these texts, the verses that say that they're non-different? So some recessions read that Brahman is the fisherman, the knave, which teach the general non-difference of the self. Now, this is important. Both sets of texts have to be taken in their primary sense. Ramanuja is going to say, my way of reading this, I'm not saying this group of statements is higher and this group of statements is lower. This group of statements we take literally, that group of statements we don't. He's saying, how can you do that to the scripture? The scripture doesn't say that. The scripture doesn't say this group of statements is higher and this other group, don't take it literally, take it symbolically. Scripture never says that. So Ramanuja is going to say, if you follow Advaita, he's, in a sense, he's kind of like imposing his own, view upon the scripture, because the scripture never says there's higher and lower types of statements. And we find this in Christian theology, by the way. We find that in Philo, and then the early church fathers like Origen. And so they would say a very similar thing, that all the descriptions in the Old Testament where God is described as, like with a body and with voice and with eyes and, showing himself to Moses and Ezekiel and, revealing and giving the, at the parting of the Red Sea, the Israelites saw God and all of this. He would say, oh, that's just for, these are concessions in the Bible for less intelligent Christians that need, a kind of humanoid idea of God. But he comes out and says this. and he's following Philo, the great Jewish theologian of the first, second century, who was the first to start this. Oh, but really God is completely beyond any form, and is not limited by a body, and blah blah blah. So they say exactly this. There are places in the Bible which are for the more educated, more spiritually advanced, but there's concessions made for literally rustic, for the uneducated. And that's why the God of the Old Testament is the word is anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic means with a human-like form. So they're doing the same thing. This is a common thing. Ramanuja is indignant about this, as many Christians were. What right do you have to say that these statements in the scripture are higher and these are for the more ignorant, when the scripture says nothing of the sort? What right do you have to intervene with your little human intellect and start dividing up the scripture and saying, well, this is higher, this is lower, and imposing your frame of reference when the scripture itself does nothing of the sort? So there was indignation, even across the centuries, to the Christian way of allegorizing the Old Testament and the Garden of Eden, right? Who believes in a Garden of Eden? How many Christians believe in a Garden of Eden? There's probably a few, but you'd be hard pressed to find a Christian believing in a literal Garden of Eden and a literal Adam and Eve and a literal snake and a literal apple. You might find a few, but most people will say there's a metaphor. On what grounds? Where does the Bible say it's a metaphor? Nowhere, my friends, nowhere. So that is exactly, these are the rationalists, which are what the early church fathers are, trying to give a rational, respectable, intellectually respectable interpretation of the Old Testament in a highly sophisticated Greek, philosophical, the Near East was all Greek culture, all educated people were thoroughly schooled in Aristotle, Plato, the Greek philosopher, laughing at the Christians. By the way, I'm writing a book on this. Every single thing I'm saying here are massively documented. So so I'm not just sort of shooting my mouth, but at this time, at least, I have a little bit of substance there. The Christians were considered to be rustic simpletons, shepherds, and uneducated. So the early church fathers had to, this is what a theologian does. You've got to give you've got to give some intellectual dignity to your tradition. And so what do? You adopt the philosophical categories of your day. And back then it was Aristotle and Plato, especially middle Platonism. So similar kind of thing going on here. So Ramanuja is saying, well, you can't just. So he's saying, third line, both sets of texts have to be taken in their primary sense. Here, both. How do I highlight? Ramanuja says, you can't say these are higher and that's lower. What right do you have? Again, Brahman, which is ever all-knowing, can never come under the influence of ignorance. Brahman can never come under ignorance. This is the big problem with Advaita Vedanta. You want to say the world is unreal. Why is it unreal? Because of ignorance. Well, what's ignorance then? How can Brahman be covered by ignorance? This is this has been a huge problem for Advaita over the last 1200 years. Right. So therefore, and then again, the third group, nor can the soul be Brahman under a limiting adjunct, right? A limiting adjunct, the body limits my consciousness. I can only see as far as the eyes let me see, hear as much as the ears allow. So I'm limited by this body. My mind limits me to what the kind of inferences I can make, deductions I can make from what I perceive. It's limiting, and they're adjuncts, they're added on. They're an adjunct. There's like an adjunct professor is someone that doesn't have tenure. They just kind of they adjuncts. They can get fired at any time, and they bring him in to teach a course, and they pay him tuppence halfpenny. It's quite cruel, the life of an adjunct. If you don't get tenure, it's quite awful, and you have to teach 5 courses and run around from one university to another. It's really quite awful. You're just an adjunct. You're just sort of added on to the regular faculty. So the upadhis are adjuncts. I don't know if it's the best translation. I would say, if I had to think about it, I don't know, I'll think about it. Upadhi. I would say superimposed limitation. I wouldn't try to capture it in one word. I don't think you can get it in one word. I think you'd have to have a little phrase. superimposed limiting. I see how hard it is. Okay. Therefore, right, so nor can the soul be Brahman under limiting adjunct, for in that case, Brahman, if you say it's really Brahman, but it's been limited by these bodies, then that means Brahman will have to experience all the happiness and misery experienced by the souls in the world, which would contradict all scriptural texts which declare the nature of Brahman, and you didn't say it, to be Ananda. So if you say that the soul is really Brahman limited, well, that means Brahman is suffering then. Well, that, apart from the fact that that's ridiculous, what kind of a Brahman is suffering? But apart from that, it would contradict the text, which say that Brahman is Ananda. So therefore what? Therefore, the only alternative left is that the soul is a part of Brahman, yes, in which case alone both these sets of texts can be taken in their primary sense. If you take it as a part, but wait a minute, what kind of a part? Not because he's just said group number one. By part, however, what does he mean? Is meant that which constitutes one aspect of a substance. Okay, he's going to give an example. So here, a distinguishing quality of a substance is a part of the substance. So for example, the luster of gems. So the gem is the substance, but it shines the radiance. So the radiance is a part of the gem, but it's also a little bit different. It also has a sort of nature of its own. It's inseparable from the gem, but at the same time, when we speak of the gem and the gem's luster, we're kind of talking about two different things. One is a substance, one is a quality of the gem, which is its shininess, its brilliance, and so forth. Right, another example. Okay, you may not understand this. The generic character of a cow in cows. I don't want to get into this, but it's called a universal. Let's not do this. Do you want to do this? No. All right, thank you, Domenico. That was a very decisive shake of the head. All right, now what else? Okay, the body of an embodied being. There's a difference between the soul, and Ramanuja loves this. This is his favorite metaphor. There's embodied being is the one in the body. So that there's a body and a soul in the body. They're inseparable. I mean, you know, at least the body cannot function without the soul. So in one sense, they're one, because the soul pervades the body, but they're also very different. This is a better metaphor. So therefore, he likes to think of the souls as kind of like almost like a body of God, that they depend on God for everything. We can't do anything without these. You know, we're given senses, we're given bodies, all of this is prakriti, all of this is bestowed upon us by Bhagavan. As Krishna says, this is my maya, this is my prakriti, devihi ishaguna mayi mama maya, these are my gunas. So the soul is completely dependent for everything on God, but it's still a distinct entity with free will. That's Ramanuja's position. That's it. So that's all. I think we took us almost an hour on that one. And let's get into some of this other stuff. So it's an answer 42 to 52. I don't think we have enough time to read more. Let's see what he has to say about advaita. Moreover, the arguments, verse 49, put forward by those who hold that the soul is Brahman covered by ignorance, that's Advaita Vedanta, are all fallacious. Why? Well, and he doesn't mention Advaita Vedanta, he's being quite polite. That's what you do when you're polite. You refute somebody's position, philosophy, but you don't mention them. Otherwise, you know, you might trigger their ego, or you might, so he's being sort of a little bit sort of civil, but strong, very strong, fallacious. Why? Well, they say that Brahman, which is pure consciousness, is covered by ignorance, which means that Brahman loses the essential quality of consciousness. It's like saying the sun is dark. It goes against the very definition of what the sun is. The sun can never be dark. By definition, it can be covered by a cloud, but that's an external thing. The sun in its own nature can never be dark. Its very nature is luminosity. So the nature of Brahman is pure consciousness. It can never be covered by ignorance. That would destroy its very nature. So they say that Brahman, which is pure consciousness, is covered by ignorance, which means what? That Brahman loses the essential quality of consciousness. If you say the sun is dark, then you're saying the sun loses its essence, which is luminosity. Then it's not a sun anymore. You destroyed it. So you can never say Brahman is covered by ignorance, because then the very nature of Brahman would be destroyed from Ramanuja's point of view. That would mean the destruction of Brahman itself. You see? There. All right. Okay. Now he goes on. An explanation is sought to be given, because he quotes some verses. And another thing. Shall we move on to the fun stuff, friends? Do we want to read about karma and the subtle body? But you do understand this is Vedanta, though. And Vedanta is all about these lineages, and the debate is fundamental to it. So if this is not your thing, then cross it off this does not need to be on your Svadhyaya reading list. The purpose we put this together is so because you hear this word Vedanta, it's thrown around so loosely. But hopefully now you have a clearer sense of what it is. And it's all about Brahman. Tato Brahma Jignasa, the first sutra. Now we're going to inquire into the nature of Brahman. And everything, that inquiry is completely delimited by whatever the Upanishads have to say about Brahman. Okay, so all right, let's look at some of this. All right, do you want to know about prana? How about prana? Would that be interested? Or how about why posit a subtle body? Okay. So let's do that. We'll go to 2.3.32. Why do we say there's a 2.3.32? I think we can read Shankara for this and see what he has to say, and then we'll read both of them. All right, 2.3.32, Shankara, 2.3.42, 2.3.32. Let's have a look at this. There we are. And let's make this a little bit bigger, 100. Okay. Right, if there was not a subtle body, right, the intellect and the mind, if the intellectual mind, because they're two parts of the subtle body, be not accepted, what would happen? He didn't have it. There would result either perpetual perception or perpetual non-perception, or else the limitation of the power of either of the two, right? Let's see what he means by that. Question. That's the sutra. Now he's going to unpack it. What is the necessity of accepting an internal organ, the antakarana? Okay, there's lots of names for the internal organ. You can call it the sukshma sharira. You can call it the linga sharira. You can call it the antakarana. You can call it the chitta, but that's only part of it. It consists of the chit, the manas, the buddhi, ahankara. It consists of the 10 indriya, the shaktis, sometimes called pranas. In Sankhya, the 5 Gyanindriyas and Karmindriyas, yes? You've seen your charts? What happens when the 3 gunas start to agitate? The first thing that comes out is buddhi. The next thing that comes out is ahankara. And then it splits up into manas. And then you have the 5 Karmindriyas and the 5 Gyanindriyas, and then you have the 5 tanmatras. All that is the subtle body. The last 5, which is the Mahabhutas, earth, water, air, fire, ether, that's the gross body which dies at death. It does not accompany the Atman. All the rest accompanies the Atman. So that subtle body has a form, actually. It takes the form of the body. That's why you could probably have ghostly bodies. Because you would have a ghostly body. Your body, until it took another body, would have the subtle form of that particular body. So if you left that body, let's say you became a ghost for a period, karma, that's also a jati. That's considered to be one of the 8,400,000 species. There are jatis. You're not eternally a ghost, but you by karmically be stuck in a situation where due to karma, you don't get a gross body for a limited period of time because of something you did. Let's say, you know what they say? They say if you commit suicide, If you die under intoxication, if you sleep with the guru's wife, I bet you know who wrote that one in, right? he was writing the person writing the Prana. He goes, okay, all right, if you commit suicide, and then if you die under intoxication, he looks over and there's his young brahmachari, all good looking, and his wife, and checking out his wife, and he puts down, and if you sleep with the guru's wife, that's number 3. And then there's a 4th one. So if you die under those 4 conditions, you become a bhuta. It's called a bhuta or a preta. It's just a karmic. It's like being a dog or a tree or taking birth in anything. And then until your karma is burnt. Now, in that state, you have the subtle body, which would presumably, now this is me talking, but I'm presuming would have the shape of whatever the last gross body is, because it hasn't entered into a new body, so it hasn't configured itself into the contours of the new body. Then the subtle body, it takes a new blueprint, the gunas of that subtle body, so arrange it in such a way that it fits into the womb of a new body. So there's a 4th thing as well, or maybe it's just 3. So what's the necessity of accepting an eternal organ? So antakarana, of which the intellect is only a mode. The buddhi is only one aspect of it. The sutra says that if we don't accept the subtle body, then what? The senses being always in contact with their objects, there would always result the perception of everything. If you didn't have a subtle body limiting karmically, then your consciousness would just go through the senses and you'd see the whole universe and hear the whole universe and smell the whole universe. There would be no control on consciousnesses, on the senses transmitting consciousness to every single sense object in the universe. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what the siddhas can do. They're not liberated, but the siddhas in chapter 3 of Patanjali, when Patanjali says you can know everything, not necessarily liberated, but you can bypass your subtle, the upadis. There we have it. What nice word we just learned. The upadi. Remember the word upadi? Yes? Limitation. So if you didn't have that limitation, what's to stop your consciousness then flowing out through your senses? And you would either know everything or you would know nothing. Well, the opposite would be true. Look. So if the subtle body is not accepted, the senses being always in contact with their objects, because our senses are always in contact with the sense objects, even when you sleep, your eyeballs pressed up against your eyelid, you're actually seeing your eyelid, I think, somehow, right? So I think that's true. I don't know if it's true. So there would always result perception of everything, because everything's in place, all the requisites, all the things, the requisite, what you need. What do you need? You need a soul, you need senses, and you objects, they're present. So if you didn't have a subtle body limiting it, so the subtle body of a dog allows it to smell further. The subtle body of a dog also allows it to hear further. The subtle body of a vulture allows it to see further. So the subtle body is karmically allowing consciousness to extend a certain distance and know a certain range. The subtle body doing that. Now you get rid of the subtle body, there's no restriction anymore. It's like light. What's to stop light? We talk about light traveling through the universe from Big Bang. If there's nothing stopping it, just keep traveling. So consciousness and mind stuff is like that. So that's why karma does not allow that. Our karma is exactly that which delimits, right? So all the requisites, the soul, the senses, and the objects are present. Now, if you deny this, and you say, no, we deny it, then it would mean that knowledge can never result. Either it sees everything or it sees nothing. You can't have it halfway. Why would you can't, if there's no subtle body, you wouldn't just say, I can see, 100 yards. It's the subtle body that's doing that. So if you take it away, either you see the whole universe or you see nothing. There will be no intermediary range of the senses. That's what Ramanuja is saying. So the opponent will have to accept, the opponent meaning somebody who says, we don't need a subtle body. Let's just have a soul in the material body with its senses. So that's the opponent. So the opponent will have to accept the limitation of the power, either of the soul or the senses. Either you're going to say, either the soul can see everything, and if you say no, then you've limited the soul. Your soul is no more infinite, and that goes against all scriptures. Either you're going to have to say the soul is limited, or if you say, or you're going to have to say the senses are limited and don't function. So you run into a problem either way. That such a thing is not possible in the Atman, which is changeless. You can't limit it. I mean, the subtle body can, but you can't say that inherent in the Atman is limitation. No, it's the subtle body that restricts it. All right. Nor can it be said that the power of the senses, which is not impeded either in the previous moment or in the subsequent moment, is so limited in the middle. You can't say the senses that just have a middle kind of range. It's all or nothing. There's nothing to limit them. So either they won't work at all in the absence of a subtle body, or they'll see the whole universe, hear the whole universe, smell the whole universe. There's nothing that would keep their range in the middle. This is why we have to accept an internal organ antakarana, through whose connection and disconnection, perception and non-perception takes place. So when you have a subtle body, then we perceive reality to the extent that the subtle body allows us to do that. And we see that so far, and we hear so far. Okay. And does Shankara have anything interesting to say on that one? What are we? We are 2:3:32. Oh, that is Shankara. What about Ramanuja? 2:3:32. More or less the same. All right. So let's have a look at Prana. 2:4:8. Because we all heard of pranayama, and we all like to think we all do a bit of pranayama, and we think that's a. But what is prana? Did you ever think? I've got a book on my desk. All the different schools. What did they say about Brahma? Prana. They all say, there's lots of different views of what it is, and actually, this text doesn't actually tell us what it is. I have my opinion based on, some statements, but I can't remember where I read them, but it makes sense to me. The chief prana, right? So the 5 pranas, and sometimes there's 10 pranas, because Shankara says that the 10 indriyas, the karma indriyas and gyan indriyas of Sankhya, right? The 5 knowledge acquiring senses, ear, nose, etc. And the 5 working senses, right? The hand, the organs, the genitals, the legs, the tongue, and the anus. Their functioning is facilitated by pranas. So some people call them pranas, and which makes them 10. Some calls them shaktis, and Sankhya calls them indriyas. It doesn't matter; it's all the same thing. So, but then there's also the 5. There are 5 main pranas, and the chief so the chief prana is neither air nor its function, on account of being mentioned separately. Why is it not air? Because the Upanishads mention it separately. Remember, all of this is connected to the Upanishads. The sutra discusses the nature of the chief prana, called prana. Is this prana mere air, or its function, right? The air and its function, which is moving in and out as breath, right? Rechaka and all of that. Or is it mere air, which has assumed a special condition? Is it just straightforward air, or air in some kind of special condition? What does that mean? The opponent holds that it is mere air. And why? According to the text, prana is air. It says it in the Upanishads. So the opponent says, well, that's what it says, so it's air. Or that it may be the function of air as inhalation and exhalation. So that would be Rechaka and Purvaka, Rechaka, inhalation and exhalation. These views are rejected by the sutra. And why? On account of being mentioned separately from air in the text. So that air is listed in the text and prana is listed separately. If prana was air, they wouldn't list it separately. So it must be something different. On the other hand, we don't find it in the Sankhya table. There's no prana there. There is the, the five Gyanendriyas, the five Karmendriyas, then there's the Tanmatras, and then there's the Mahabhutas. Where's prana? So, and then he quotes the verse that mentions it separately. From him are produced the vital force, mind, the sense organs, space, air, fire, right? So vital force is prana. So prana is listed separately from mind, the sense organs, space, right? These are the five elements. Akasha, Vayu, Agni, right? Water is Vaji. What is the word? There's so many words of water, and I can't think of one right now. And earth, right? Bhumi Vapu Nalo. Gita says, Bhumi Apo Nalo Vayur Kam Mano Buddhireva Cha. So the Gita, the names are differently. Bhumi is earth. Bhumi Vapor. No, I'm getting the word wrong. Doesn't matter. So the Bhumi Apa is Apas. Water is Apas, which becomes Apa, and it's declined irregularly. And I remember. So Apas, Bhumi Apas, Nala is another word for Agni. Vayur, air. Kam is another word for Akasha. So the Gita uses these old terms. You might find them written down differently. So therefore, it's listed separately in the list. It says prana, mind, and the sense organs, the karmendriyas, gyanendriyas, and that's in the mundaka. So therefore, it must be something different. It has its own place on the list. So it cannot be a mere function of air, for the text does not mention the functions of the other elements as separate things. The text doesn't say anything about it being a function. So the text prana is air only. So now what are you going to do with the text which says prana is air? You've got to account for that. Remember, this is Vedanta, my friends. The opponent brings in a verse in the Upanishads and says, well, it says here, prana is air. He says the sutra says, no, it's something different because it's listed differently in the list. But what are you going to do with the opponent who says, well, it still says prana is air in this other text. So what does that mean then? Well, the text prana is air only indicates that prana is air which has assumed a special form, but not altogether a separate thing from air, like fire. Fire is separate from air. So prana is not completely, fire is completely different from air, but prana isn't completely different from air, but it's something more. It's not a separate element, right? But it does. But notice he doesn't tell us what it is. The vital force is not a separate element, but an instrument of the soul like eyes. It's an instrument. My friends, what from what little study I've done of this, and I can't remember, it's a long time ago I read this. For me, not for me, Edwin Bryant, but I mean, in terms of the opinions that are out there, I favor the opinion, how does consciousness, how does it transfer around the body? The Atman is located, this is very clear, no Vedanta, it's in the cave of the heart. So that's the sort of that's the emanating point of the Atman is infinitesimal, and it's located in the cave of the heart, called the cave of the heart, the guha. And there it radiates, but how does it radiate out? And why doesn't it just keep radiating out through the skin and through the entire world, the entire universe? Okay, it's somehow delimited by the subtle body, but certainly in the opinion of some, it's carried around the body by the prana. So prana is air, but infused with consciousness. So it's actually air infused. So it's kind of what Ramanuja is saying, but he's not coming right out and saying what makes it different. And that air, the pranas, they circulate the body and they carry along with them, just like the blood vessels carry. You can put stuff in the blood, right? And the blood can carry stuff around the arteries in a gross way. Can't it? Can't you put something in the blood and it gets covered and it gets carried around the body? So the pranic is actually air infused with consciousness. Now, one other opinion that I've read in the commentaries of the Yoga Sutra, which it's possible, I find it rational, is that it's not carrying consciousness, it's carrying buddhi. It's carrying intelligence around the body. So that's another opinion, and both work, I think, reasonably well. Both sound coherent. Both make sense. But so to take your pick, but the prana then is air carrying something. I favor consciousness because or buddhi, or maybe both. But clearly we know consciousness does pervade the body. So how does it get carried around to all the limbs of the body? And then it stops. Why doesn't it spill out through the pores of the body? So if we accept that there are these nadis, right? 84, what is it, 84 million or 24 million or 20, it's in the Upanishad, some rather significant number of nadis. Can't remember what it was, but there's thousands. It's written in one of the Upanishads. So if they're transporting consciousness, maybe they're transporting both. So it's air transporting either consciousness or intelligence, or why not both? Both, it all works well. Okay, so there you have that. Okay, so that's that verse. So if the vital force is an instrument of the soul, that's why I favor consciousness. Because how is it an instrument of the soul? What is the soul? Consciousness. So what's it? What kind of an instrument does the soul need? Well, the instrument the soul needs is to carry consciousness around the body. What else does the soul need to do? So notice he's not saying it's the instrument of the buddhi. He's saying it's instrument of the soul. So that's why I favor the idea that it's instrumental value to the soul. Remember, what is the soul? It's nothing other than a monad of consciousness, chit, sat chit, sat chit. So it's carrying chit, in my opinion. So, but I do remember reading somewhere that buddhi. One commentator argued it could be buddhi. So, if the vital force or the prana is an instrument of the soul, then like eyes, etc., it must have some particular activity or function helpful to the soul, but no such activity is visible. Right, that's the opposing point of view. The next sutra refutes this objection. The objection that the prana has no activity helpful to the soul is not correct, but the vital force maintains the body with all the organs. That's why it is the forces behind the 10 karamindriyas and gyanindriyas, my friends. And you can call them shaktis, because what shakti means to empower. Shak means to allow something to do something. That's what the verbal root shak is to allow something to do something. One word for that might be empower. So therefore, there are 10 shaktis that allow the eyes to see. We're not talking about the gross eyeball. That's just atoms. It's just atoms and bits of matter. But there's something more that allows vision, that allows audition and so forth, right? So these are shaktis. You can call them pranas. Prana just means prana. It just sort of surges forth. Pra means to go forth. So they're all just different descriptors for the same thing. You'll call them indriyas, and indriya comes from indri, and that means, again, that the word is associated with power. I don't think there's a verbal root, indri. Take off the iya, and I have to look it up. I can't remember. They're all basically the same thing, right? So the pranas allow, empower, energize the body. What does that mean? Let's tighten up our language. Allows the organs and instruments of the body to do what they have to do. That's the prana. And how does it do that? It takes consciousness and carries it around the nadis on air. So consciousness, air infused with consciousness, then circles the body and empowers the organs to do what they do. That's about as scientific an explanation of the subtle body that I can give and that I've ever found. Okay, so the prana subserves the purpose of the soul and is therefore an instrument of the soul like the eyes. Right, let's move on to our next we have our little list. And what else do we have? So we've got prana is different from air. The subtle body accompanies the soul. Oh, we did why posit a subtle body in the first place, and we discussed that. Now let's have a look at how it, how does it accompany the soul? So what was that for? We're just jumping around today, my friends, because we've only got one more session after this, unless we decide otherwise. And I just want you to, I want you to get a sense of the diversity of the Vedanta Sutra. Otherwise, you're going to think it's all about arguments against Buddhism and Sankhya, but it's got lots of cool stuff, which then gets developed much more elaborately in the later traditions. So if you're interested in subtle body stuff, then the Shakta traditions are the place, I think one place. The Shakta traditions are very into, chakras and Kundalini and the nadis, and that's sort of very central to the Shakta traditions, also known as Tantra, also known as the Siddha traditions. Again, there's many names for them. You could say Siddha, Tantra, Hatha, or these are Shakta. I prefer the term Shakta. I think it's probably more tradition-based. Hatha is used much later, as far as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, nobody ever heard of it until it came to the West. Because it's got a whole chapter on asana. Coincidentally, why do you think it came to the West, my friends? Why does the Hatha Yoga Pradipika come to the West when nobody in India has ever heard of it? No commentary has ever quoted it. Nobody ever mentions it in the whole millions of verses. They never mention the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Why not? Because they never heard of it. Why haven't they never heard of it? Because it's a marginal text. It's some marginal text up in the Himalayas somewhere. So why do who plucked it out then? Krishnamacharya probably. Or why do you do that? Because it's got a whole chapter on asana. It's got 30 or 40 asanas. Why do you want to do that? Because you need scriptural support. If you're going to start putting all this focus on asana, you support it scripturally. And Patanjali has only got 3 verses. It's a bit weedy, as they used to say when I was a kid in England. It's a bit weedy, right? It's a bit minuscule. It's a bit of a small number there. Three out of 200 sutras, right? Stiram Sukham, right? Tata, what is it? Tata something Nabhigataha. So Dvandva. So you do better than that. Can't you do better than that? Oh, well, here we have. We got the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Well, let's pluck that out of obscurity then, because it's got a whole chapter on asana. And that's why we're all reading Hatha Yoga Pradipika, because if it's the Rig Veda, nobody ever heard of it, my friends. Before, in 1960, you go to India, ask anyone, sit on a train, Delhi, Bombay, walk up and down the train and say, Namaskar ji, kya hal chal hai, ye ek shastra hai, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, kabhi sun liya? Have you ever heard of it? And they go, kya? There. All right. I'll control myself. All right. So here we are. Back to the text. Where are we? We're going to go to something else. Where are we going to go? Oh, we're going to go to the subtle body. The 3, 1. 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. I'm feeling a bit jovial today. I hope you forgive me. Are we allowed to have a sense of humor? Are the Shastris allowed to have a bit of a sense of humor? Or do you have to be boring all the time? Right, where are we? So we're subtle body, 3, 1, 3. So let's go to Ramanuja, 3, no, that's 4. Ramanuja, 3, 1, 3. Okay, right. So get rid of this. 3, oh no, starts at 1. So let's go back. So this is the 3rd chapter now. The soul goes out of the body. Let's make this a bit bigger. And we'll have questions, don't worry. The soul, when passing out of the body...
You're not seeing it.
Oh, you're not seeing it. You know why? Because I messed up. So let's put this down here. And then we'll put you down there. You cannot minimize Zoom when you're recording the meeting. Oh, then what do I do? Then we go here. Oh, I know what to do. Then we click on you back there. And then we do this. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Right? Can you see it now? Can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the soul, when passing out of the body at death, is enveloped with the fine particles of the gross elements. I think that means the Tan Matras. The fine particles of the gross element. I think that means the 5 qualities. I have to look at the Sanskrit. The soul goes out of the body, enveloped with subtle parts of the gross elements. What does it say here? Tad antra pratipatao ranhati samparishvaktaha prashna rupa rupanabhyam samparishvaktaha ranhita. And it doesn't say anything about subtle. All right, let's just read it. The soul goes out of the body enveloped with subtle parts of the gross elements, with a view to obtaining another fresh body. So it is known from the question and answer in the scripture, right? So how do we know this? Well, somewhere in the scripture, there's a question and answer, some kind of a dialogue, right? He'll tell us where it is. Remember, you can never make a claim about anything, about the soul leaving the body and still being in this subtle body. And you can't just sort of say that unless it's in the scripture. So how do we know it? It's known from the question and answer in the scripture. Let's see which passage he's talking to. The sutra discusses whether in transmigration, the soul takes with it subtle parts of the gross elements as the seed, as it were, for the future body or not. But what he means here is the tanmatras, the 5 subtle elements, not the last 5 gross elements, because they die, they're the body. He's calling it the subtle parts of the gross elements. They are gross compared to the mind and the intelligence, obviously. They're gross compared to the other components of the subtle body, but they're still, so they're intermediary, really. So they're intermediary between the gross elements, which is the gross body, which is left behind. And then you have the mind and the intellect and the pranas, the 10 pranas or the indriyas or the shaktis, whatever you want to call them, and the manas. They're subtle. And then you have the tanmatras, which are in the middle. So he calls them the subtle parts of the gross elements. Right. So the whole lot goes. So do they go as well? The opponent holds that it does not take them, for it's useless, because the elements are easily available everywhere. You can get elements everywhere. The opponent seems to be accepting that you need to take your mind or your intelligence, maybe because they're not everywhere, but also because karma is stored there. Otherwise, how would you get your karma? Your chitta has to get your karma, not your Atman. Your chitta, are we clear about this? Your chitta is the one that is making decisions and acting. It's your mind. So the karma has to come back to your mind, not somebody else's. So how's it going to come back to your mind then if you're dead? Well, because you take the same mind into the next body, except that now of course, if you're in a dog's body, then tamas is going to close up, the human memories, aspect. In other words, the chitta has millions of clusters of samskaras in it, and certain clusters activate and they're appropriate for a particular body, and all the other clusters are covered by tamas, just like our memories are when we're in deep sleep, but they're all there. And so therefore, it's the same subtle body. So though the dog may now have to receive the karma for something it did as a human, you only get karma for what you did as a human. So as a human, let's say I kick somebody. So now, for example, and then I die, and now I need to be kicked. So now all of that then memory, right? The samskaras get covered by tamas. They're there, but they're covered by tamas. So that now I need to be taken birth as a dog, let's say, for whatever karmic reason, and I need to receive a kick at some point. So someone's going to come, and it's not going to be identical, but the pain's going to be the same. The situation obviously can't be the same, because that situation's past. The way I kicked, that context of that, whatever that was, maybe it was a rugby game, or soccer, like some of these soccer players, they foul each other, right? So you kick somebody, whatever. You're not going to duplicate that context, but the force of the kick, the experience that the person who received the kick, the suffering that person now, the kicker now has become a dog. He needs to receive that level of pain, although obviously the manner of receiving it is going to be different. So then somebody goes up and kicks the dog, and the dog is yelps, as they do in India, right? But so that's karma. Have you seen the dogs in India? Oh my God, what an awful, awful, awful karma. I mean, they just, especially it's a vicious life. At nighttime they go around in packs, and if any of them are wounded, the rest of them just rip them to shreds. Someone gets hit by a car, you see these dogs, and they're dragging themselves along with only 2 front paws, and they're all broken hips. You won't see them again in the morning. Not because the other dogs will just savage them. It's vicious. So anyway, right. So
Edwin, it's 7:30.
Okay, thank you, Eleonora. Right, the opponent holds that it doesn't take them. This sutra refutes it. And what the soul when it goes out of one body and takes another, it goes out with the subtle parts of the gross elements. So not only does it take the buddhi, the manas, the ahankara, the 10 pranas or shaktis or indriyas, whatever you want to call them, it also takes the 5 subtle elements. And that's why you have ghostly forms. In principle, you could see that subtle body, you know, and then there's all kinds of claims throughout history of people seeing ghosts. Vedanta would accept that as a possibility, that you could probably see these forms. All right, so that's that. So what I did want to fit in was the meditation. So we go to 4. Right. Just because this overlaps with Patanjali, and because, you know, many of us, we like to think of ourselves as meditators. It's not going to say anything particularly dynamic, but it just of interest, I think. Right. Now, frequent repetition of meditation. We're in Ramanuja's Bhata. So repetition of meditation is to be practiced again and again on account of the teaching. Remember, any claim, it's got to be, the teaching means what? Upanishads. The text, what text? Upanishads. The texts say in this connection, he who knows Brahman attains the highest. Where did the text say that? Taittiriya, Upanishad. And again, another text. Having known him, thus one transcends death. Who says that? Shvetasvatara Upanishad. And yet again, he who knows Brahman becomes like Brahman. Who says that? Mundaka. What else? When the seer sees him who is bright like gold, Mundaka, right? Patanjali seer. What is he seeing? Sva, Rupa. What is that? What does that look like? You have to give a metaphor. It doesn't look like anything. It's consciousness. Consciousness can't be seen. So you just say something poetic, like gold. What's the metaphor? Well, it's brilliant. Right. Now, here the question is raised, whether the act of meditation, called jnana, prescribed in the Vedanta texts, and it's a different kind of meditation, because you're meditating on, it's not Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This is jnana yoga type meditation. And you're meditating on things that are symbolic or alambanas for Brahman. They're Upanishadic passages, like the golden person in the sun is one that I remember. And by meditating, fixing your mind on the way that it's described, then because it's a symbol or a alambana of Brahman, it eventually dissolves into Brahman. It's a bit like bhakti meditation. The bhakta is meditating on Krishna in the mind. What Krishna is in the mind? You're meditating on a form made of samskaras. You're patching together a form. You get your blue that you're familiar with in your reality. You get the shape. Maybe you've seen a picture somewhere. Maybe you saw, or maybe it's your deity. And you meditate like I meditate on a Gopala. So I put together, bits and pieces from pictures I've seen. And clearly it's a construct of the mind. Everybody knows that. But everything's a construct of the mind. Everything. Jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, even Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Who's doing the Nirodha? The Nirodha samskara. What's that? A construct of the mind, isn't it? Till you get to near bija. So what then what? So therefore, don't think, oh, only this is all a mental construct. Everything's a mental construct. You don't want to say that, because your whatever you just said was a mental construct. You start walking around saying this is a mental construct, that's a mental construct. Well, your words coming out your mouth are a mental construct then. The very notion of a mental construct is a mental construct. So you can't be playing that card, because then you can't say anything. So therefore, what kind of a mental construct do we want to construct then with the mind? So the bhaktas want to construct the image of Krishna, and then the idea being at some point that dissolves, and the real and Krishna, Bhagavan Svayam, manifests to the perceiver. You have a direct vision of God. That's what the bhakta wants. What does the jnani want? He wants to have an experience of all-pervading Brahman. How do you do that then? Well, you meditate on some of these, and we missed that whole part of the Vedanta because it's boring. I hate to say that. No, let me rephrase that. I don't want to be disrespectful. No, I love the Vedanta. It's, how should we help me, somebody? It is, shall we say, not the best thing to read on a Friday night at 8 o'clock. How about that? Tedious, no, that's a bit strong, Tim. Let's say something polite, like a Victorian compliment, right? Sounds like a compliment, really it's a put down. This Vedanta,
Dense,
pardon?
dense,
What's that?
dense.
I can't hear, you'd have to put it in the chat. Oh, dense, yeah.
Dense.
That's a nice one. Dense, how about, dense. It's for the scholastically inclined. Put on a bit of a snooty accent. It's for the scholastically inclined. All right. So, but it's all mental construct. Let's get back to where we were. All right. So now, here the question. Right now, what's the question? The question is raised whether the act of meditation prescribed in the Vedanta texts is to be practiced only once, or to be practiced again and again. The opponent holds it is to be practiced once. I don't know what kind of an opponent. This seems to be a made-up opponent. I can't imagine anybody saying this. I think sometimes they just make stuff up just not to make it up in a just silly way, but they make up a purva paksha just to enhance the meaning of the sutra. So they create a pretend. They don't always do this, not at all, because you recognize, you know who the purva pakshas are. If you study a lot of Indian philosophy, you know who the opponents are. But in this case, I can't imagine anybody says you only meditate once. But anyway, so that's the opponent. Why? Why does the opponent say that? For there is no authority for repeating the meditation again and again, as the text quoted above indicate, right? So these texts above, they don't say you do it again and again. Let's look at them again. The text say in this connection, he who knows Brahman attains the highest. It doesn't say you meditate again and again. And so, having known him, one transcends death. Nothing about again and again. He who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. Nothing again. Right? So the opponent says, where does it say in the text? You do it again and again. This sutra refutes this view and says that acts of meditation must be repeated. This is the purport of the scripture. The purport of the scripture is that the form Vedana, knowing, right? Veda means to know, and Vedana is the act of knowing. The scriptures say that Vedana, the act of knowing, is synonymous with the terms dhyana and upasana. We know the term dhyana as the seventh limb of yoga. And by the way, meditation, the word samadhi is not used that often in the older texts. The term dhyana is. So don't think when you read the term dhyana in the older text, it's referring only to the seventh limb of yoga and only sort of not quite there yet. No, dhyana means that entire process that Patanjali calls chitta vritti nirodha. That entire thing is called dhyana in the early texts. It is not the seventh limb of yoga. Patanjali then puts it as the seventh limb of yoga, and he adds samadhi, and he adds 7 stages of samadhi. But if you see the term dhyana in the Upanishads or the Mahabharata, it means meditation, the entire thing, the entire package. So, this is another thing. Not only are there so many different schools, my friends, but then chronologically, if you start paying attention to words and ideas and practices chronologically, you've got a whole other series of changes and differences. You don't have to do any of this. You just have to surrender to Bhagavan, Ishvara. But it's nice for you to know a little bit about what the different things are. And that's all we try to accomplish in this workshop. There's very few real Vedantins that are really, there are. In Advaita Vedanta, there's still serious, stalwart, and you go down South India to Sringeri Math. There are real Advaita sannyasis, and they do real jnana yoga. They're meditating, they're taking these verses from the Upanishads, and they're contemplating them. That's their alambana of their mind, the support of their mind. There are, but the real jnana yoga is pretty rare. It exists, absolutely, but not what you find in the marketplace. It's serious stuff. Just like real yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, that's serious stuff. And bhakti is actually serious stuff. It's not just you go to the yoga studio once every 2 weeks and bang about on any kind of hippy dippy instrument and ask kirtan. Bhakti is keeping Bhagavan in mind 24 hours of the day. It's all serious stuff if you do it really, my friends. 24-hour business. Right, so the purport of the scripture is that the term Vedana is synonymous with the terms dhyana and upasana. And then he has to give proof of this. In the following text, the verbs vid, upas, and dhai, these are the roots of these three words, right? So dhyana comes from the Sanskrit root dhai, upasana comes from the Sanskrit root upas, and vedana comes from the Sanskrit root vid. So in the following text, the verbs, these three verbs, give the same meaning. You've got to be a grammarian as well if you want to mess around with Vedanta, with reference to one and the same object. And then he quotes all the Chandogya. Right, now let's get to bits that might be more interesting to you. Now, dhyana is meditation. It's not mere remembrance or representation. But what is it then? It's not just remembering or representing. It is the nature of continued remembrance. The verb, he's saying, the word itself means to continue to do that thing. And the term upas, from where you get upasana, has also the same meaning, because it denotes the uninterrupted series of thought of the mind that has one-pointed concentration. But this isn't the one-pointed concentration of Patanjali, where you're trying to completely eliminate still the mind. No, in Vedanta, you're trying to keep the mind fixed on these objects of meditation, which are, like the great Mahabhagyas, and more like a contemplation of Upanishadic passages. All right. Now, here linga means smriti. This meaning is made out from the smriti. The smriti means not the Vedas, the other texts, like Gita is smriti. Remember the two kinds of texts? The shruti is that which is heard. What's heard? The four Vedas and the Upanishads and the Aranyakas and Brahmanas, but don't worry about those. So there's four different kinds of genres of literatures which comprise the shruti, that which was heard. What you would have heard of are the four Vedas as well as the Upanishads. That's 2 out of the 4 shruti. Everything else is smriti. So you can quote the smriti in support of the shruti. This is the way of Vedanta exegesis. The shruti is the supreme source of authority, the Upanishads. You can bring in a smriti, like the Gita or the Mahabharata or Patanjali, as long as it doesn't contradict the shruti. Pasha will be very familiar with this, with the Hadith and the Quran. You have so many stories in the Hadith, which are, the secondary Islamic literature, and they're all valid as long as they don't contradict the Quran itself. So the Hadith are what the Prophet was said to have said, was reputed to have said, and these were handed down by the Prophet's descendants, and they form this huge corpus of material called the Hadith, and it's accepted by Muslims. But the Quran was given by angel Gabriel into the ear of Muhammad directly. So that's the Quran, and that's paramount, and that's absolute. But the Hadith is fine. But if there's any contradiction, then the Hadith will be rejected as as an unreliable source coming. So similarly, in the Vedanta tradition, you have the Shruti and the Smriti. So the Smriti you can wheel it out as Ramanuja is doing here, as long as it doesn't contradict the Shruti. So linga means Smriti. This meaning is made out from the Smriti also, which says that, right, the Smriti, not just the Upanishads, but which Smriti is he talking here? Vishnu Purana. The Purana is a Smriti, right? My text is the Bhagavata Purana. It's considered a Smriti. It doesn't consider itself a Smriti, but the larger tradition will. So the Smriti, right, and in a couple of lines, we're going to find out which Smriti, the Vishnu Purana. The Smriti also, which says the Vedana knowledge, which the means of release, has the nature of continued remembrance, right? So not just once. The opponent wants it to be just once, because the texts just say you meditate once, which is quite a silly thing to say. But nevertheless, I think Badarayana, the author, wants to stress the repeated nature of meditation. So whether the Purva Paksha is a real one or not, it doesn't matter. What does it say in the Vishnu Purana, in the 6th chapter, 7th section, verse 91? The meditation of his form. Vishnu Purana is a bhakti text. It's the text of Krishnamacharya tradition. It's exactly the same as the Bhagavata, except it's shorter and a bit more simpler, and it's less poetically embellished. The contents overlap in almost precisely. So the Vishnu Purana, and it says the meditation of his form is one continuous stream without attachment to any other object. So this is, in fact, a kind of a nirodha practice, but the mind is rolling on the form, and it can roll up and down the form. You know, you start at the feet, and then you concentrate on the various limbs of the Lord, and this is why, you know, when you read the Puranas, the descriptions of Shiva and Vishnu and Krishna are repeated again and again and again and again and again. Now, normally that's a flaw in literature. If you hand in your term paper for a humanities paper and you repeat yourself, your teacher's going to put rep, rep, rep. I do anyway. Rep, rep, rep. In the margin, repetition, repetition, repetition. That's a flaw, right, Domenica? That's not that. You don't want that. But you do want that in the Puranas. You want to keep repeating that Krishna's dhoti is yellow, that he wears a Vaijayanti mala, that he has gorgeous hair, that he has lotus eyes. Why do you keep repeating it? You got to internalize it, internalize it. Why? Because then you got to shut your eyes and meditate on it. You got to summon up, you got to conjure up that every single detail. So you better have it precise. So let's get back to the text. So the Vishnu Prana then says, the meditation of his form is one continued stream without attachment to any other objects. Meditation of him is thus generated by the 6 limbs of yoga. I didn't notice this. Vishnu Purana talks about 6 limbs of yoga. You don't think 8 limbs was like carved in stone? That's just Patanjali's way of organizing it. Vishnu Purana. And the 6 are going to overlap precisely, but I don't think he has, probably doesn't have asana. My friends, oh, what are you going to do? No, he's taken away. There's only 3 sutras in Patanjali, and Vishnu Purana is going to take those away. What will you do? What will you do in the high street yoga? You have to close all the studios. Don't bring the Vishnu Purana to the West, but it'll be like closing the pubs in England. Everybody would be riots everywhere. Don't be bringing 6 limbs of. Don't bring the Vishnu Purana. That'll be a tragedy. But there it is, 6 limbs. That's the Vishnu Purana. Therefore, the purport of the scripture is that meditation has to be repeated again and again. What else? Do we going to read all 3 verses? Let me see. What do I have? 1 to 3. Yes, we will read 1 to 3. The question is, no, we don't need 3. Right. So that's meditation. No, there's another thing about meditating and sitting. Yeah. Let's jump to 7. You'll be interested in this one. I mean, it's obvious, but it's just nice to see things in an ancient text, you know, and just framed in an archaic sort of way. One should meditate in a sitting posture, because in that way alone, meditation is possible. Asinaha, which is a verb. Now, asana is a noun. Asina is is it the present active participle as? Let me think. How do you make an asina? You put the ina. What is it? Why? How is that? Oh God! I mean, just look at that. I'm on sabbatical, and I haven't taught for 3 months, and I've forgot all my verbal forms already. All right, let's see what it says about asina. Huh? It was said before that knowledge, right, jnana, and by the way, jnana of the Atman, which is set forth by the Vedanta texts as the means of attaining final release, and denoted by the terms meditation, dhyana, worship, upasana, etc., is to be frequently practiced, right? We read that verse 1. This meditation, it was said in verse 1, which we read, is of the nature of continued succession of remembrances. You've got to keep that object of remembrance in mind. But even in Patanjali, you fix the mind on Om, tasyavachakaha pranavaha, you got to keep the Om in mind. Even in Patanjali, when you nirodha, you got nirodha on something, and he gives a list, right? Va, 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 va. Fix it on the prana, fix it on, you know, weird, you know, super normal sense of smell. He's got a little list of 6, some of which are a bit odd. Now, what's the question? The question is how to practice it. As there is no rule, the opponent holds, that the meditator may practice it either sitting or sleeping or standing or walking, right? So the opponent says, okay, we got to meditate, but the scriptures don't say anything about how, sitting. It doesn't tell you how you meditate. It just says you have to keep the repeated focus of the mind. So you can do that standing or walking or sleeping or anywhere you want, says the opponent, because there's no scripture to say otherwise. Remember, Vedanta is all about scripture, scripture, scripture. Right, that's the opponent. This view is not accepted by this sutra. Why not? One should meditate in a sitting posture. Why? What is it? Asinaha sambhavat. So the Sanskrit is sitting because of it being possible. There's only two words in there. See the two words? Sambhavat, that's dated, because it's possible. Sitting because it's possible. That's all the sutra actually says. Sutras are very minimalistic. This view is not accepted. One should meditate in a sitting posture. Why? Mental concentration is possible in that way alone. Standing or walking requires effort. You get distracted. You have to say, okay, now I'm going to stand up. Now I'm going to walk, right? So your mind is vrittying. And lying down conduces to sleep. If you lie down, what samskaras are associated with lying down, my friends? When you lie down, what samskaras are associated with lying down-ness? Sleep. So sleep's going to say, yay, great, it's our turn now. So you don't want to lie down, right? What are you going to do then? Therefore, one should meditate sitting on some support without any bodily effort. Clearly, he's now got Patanjali in mind. Stiram sukham. On some support and sukham. So in the 12th century, there's no question, I think, that Ramanuja would have read the Yoga Sutras. I can't imagine he wouldn't. I mean, I don't know that, but a verse like that suggests that he's got Patanjali's that verse in mind. Let's move on to 11 and 12. Now, wherever there is concentration of mind, there meditation is to be practiced. Yatra ekagrata tatra avisheshat. So ekagrata, by the way, is a term that's in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, fixing the mind in eka, one place, agrata, one thing in front of the mind. Yatra tatra, there, wherever concentration is possible, tatra, in that place, avisheshat, because there's no rule prohibiting it. There's nothing in the Upanishads to say it needs to be in a special place. That's the sutra, right? No mention is made of special places and times of the concentration of mind. Other texts, by the way, are going to be quite specific that you need to do it first thing in the morning, the Brahma Muhurta. They even have the name. There's 18 Muhurtas in the day. So I guess that means, I don't know, whatever it means. 1 hour and 20 minutes is a Muhurta. 18 of them, only one is Sattvic. And that's the one Muhurta before the sun rises. So it's 1 hour, 20 minutes before the sun rises. The rest of the Muhurtas are Rajasic or Tamasic. Night obviously is Tamasic. The day Rajas increases as the sun rises. There's energy, birds cheeping, insects rustling, cars on the road for us. World wakes up. So that's generating Rajasic energy. And that Rajasic energy filters into the mind. And at nighttime, what happens at night? You feel like you think you're going to sit there with a straight back? I mean, you can. This verse saying, yes, you can. There's no rules. But realistically speaking, tamas in the evening, the tamas is like, wow, you worked all day. Tamas wants to take over. You want to eat and then just sort of throw yourself and just crash, right? So other texts are going to be quite specific that you have to do the best, not that you have to, but the best time if you're a serious meditator. Just like if you're a serious skier, you're going to go somewhere where there's a ton of snow. You don't want to go to Lake Tahoe when they're blowing that snow out and making artificial snow. That's no good. You want to go where there's a ton of snow. If you're a surfer, you're not going to go to where I live in the Isle of Wight, and you got you want to go Hawaii. So if you're a serious meditator, you're going to meditate that one Muhurta, which is most favorable, which is that Brahma Muhurta. Before they call the Brahma Muhurta, the Muhurta of Brahman, because the mind, it's rested after that, it's had its tamas, it's rested after the night, and Rajas hasn't kicked in yet because the sun hasn't risen. So the world of plants, the world of animals, the world of insects, the world of birds, all of that, all those worlds and the world of the truck drivers have still not awoken. But having said all that, this verse says, no, there's no mention of special places and times. That's not quite true, actually, because the Shvetasvatara Upanishad says very specifically the yogi should find a cave or a nook by a river. It says that, a clean place, not too high, not too low, and should sit on a seat. So I beg to, oh, here it is. That, look, Shvetasvatara 2:10. Oh, hold on, I'm jumping the gun, sorry. The only thing required is that the place and time should be conducive to meditation. So there you have it, conducive. And the Brahma Muhurta is conducive. The text, meditation has to be practiced in a level and clean place. That's the verse I was just about to quote, or halfway through. Here it is, which is pleasing to the mind. Shvetashvatara only suggests any quiet place for concentration of mind. Okay, so you need to, there's no very dire rules. Certain times are conducive. We just spoke about that. If you meditate, my friends, create a sacred space in your home where you meditate, and don't use it for anything else. If you live in a small place, just create a corner somewhere with a cushion and a piece of silk, or whatever it is that will create some skaras. You're creating an environment that will create some skaras that are conducive to taking it seriously. Clean it, put some silk, make it somewhat, do something so that when you sit there, it triggers off, just like when you sit on your bed, triggers off some skaras of sleep. You open the fridge, triggers off some skaras of food, right? So you go, no, I won't say that. Okay, so then I was going to say, you go to the bathroom. It's true, actually. You go to the bathroom and it kind of like you kind of half wanted to go to the bathroom, but have you noticed this? But when you go to the bathroom, all of a sudden you really want to go. That's not the most sattvic of examples, but along the same lines, you create a meditational space. And so then when you sit there, it triggers off those kinds of, okay, now it's time for meditation. Now, it's all psychological construct, but I keep saying it. Everything's a psychological construct. So how about we construct a psychology that's aklishta? If it's all a mental construct, how about we construct that's exactly what klishta vritayaha panchatayaha means. How about we construct a state of mind that's favorable to these goals of yoga? Okay, so back we go, and what? Okay, meditation till death, 12. And then we're getting near the end of our, but we did this at least, so we can do the karma next week. The question is whether this meditation, which is the means for final release, everybody accepts that. Nyaya Sutras, if we do it in the fall, with all their logic and argument, at the end they say, oh, by the way, if you really want to experience this stuff, yoga. Everybody says yoga, but the different texts go, make different contributions to that. The Vedanta gives scriptural power, divine revelatory power to the practice of yoga. Nyaya gives intense, reasoned argumentation for the existence of an Atman, which is after all the goal of yoga. So the different schools are all making their contributions, but everybody accepts that if you actually want to experience it, only yoga. So yoga for the Atman and Bhakti yoga for Bhagavan, but it's only through yoga is the actual means of experience. The rest are just we're studying to bolster our faith, to do something with our minds, but ultimately, right? If you're going to take up yoga, you have to believe there's an Atman, don't you? What's yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha. Tada kim? Tada drashtu sarupe vasanam. Well, that means that you accept there's a drashtu. Why do you accept there's a drashtu then? If you do yoga, it means that you accept that if you chitta vritti nirodha, what does it say in the contract? If you chitta vritti nirodha, tada then what? Drashtu sarupe vastanam. Then the seer will abide in its own nature. Well, that means you accept there's a seer. Why do you accept that then? Well, because you studied the secret text and you studied Nyaya Sutra. So your faith, so your belief in the seer has long been established by intense scriptural study, such as what we're doing with Vedanta, by the reason and argument of Nyaya, who's going to reject other claims that there's no Atman, materialists, or Atman is momentary, Buddhists, or other sorts of claims. So then that Nyaya does all that work. But so when you come to do yoga, you're already informed, you have a deep enough faith, bolstered by scriptural study and intense reasoning. It's not blind faith. You have enough faith that it makes sense to you to sit on a mat, which is a completely weird and unnatural thing to do, and chitta vritti nirodha. That's the oddest thing to do. The body wants to jump around and run around. The mind wants to go running around the universe. Why on earth would anybody sit in a corner and not move? How about you do that in the 60s? Your parents will send you off to an anti-cult deprogramming. They were the deprogrammers in the 60s. You started doing stuff like that, your mum and dad will be thrusting beefsteak down your mouth and sending you off for deprogramming. You're sitting in the corner going, mad, right? So it's a very unnatural thing to do. So why would you do it then? Unless you had very deeply, you deeply informed faith that there is an Atman, there is a seer, Patanjali calls it, at least in that verse. So you can't, so I don't think you can do away with study and logical analysis, my friends. Unless you did it in a past life and you're automatically attracted in this life. All right, we're almost done. So meditation has to be performed till death. Right. So the question is whether this meditation, which is the means of final release, has to be performed only for a day. Well, I tell you what, there are people, selling, do this mantra in 2 weeks and you'll get enlightened. In the high street, come on, commodification of yoga. There's all sorts of nonsense being peddled. That this mantra and that mantra, and you get enlightened in whatever it is. Not the real stuff. Look, the question is only for a day or to be performed every day till death. And what does Patanjali say? He says it. This yatna, right? What's yatna? Yatna is, right? Yatna is tatrastito yatna. That's abhyasa. And then he says, nerantarya, dirghakala, a long time with no interruptions. Right there, I don't know, verse 1, 8, 9, something like that, 11, 12, 13. So the opponent holds that it's to be performed only for a day. He's got a shop in the high street, yoga for a day, pay so much money, and you will be enlightened in 1 day. So that's the opponent, right? As it will satisfy the scriptural purpose. Why does the opponent say that? Because the texts don't say it, they only say meditate. They don't tell you how long. This view is refuted by this sutra. Meditation has to be performed till death. Or, in other words, you do it every single day of your life, my friends. But scriptures declare that meditation should be performed from the time of commencement of meditation till death. And then he quotes the Chandogya, living indeed, thus, throughout his length of life, so that's the point, throughout his length of life, he reaches the world of Brahman. All right, so I think we're done. What do we got? 13. Yeah, I've got one more verse, and then Cece's here with us tonight. What's the fruits of meditation? Yeah, so last verse. On attaining that, non-clinging and destruction of subsequent and previous sins will result respectively, because it is so declared by the scriptures. Again, everything has to be declared by the scriptures. Hopefully you got the point by now. Having thus far investigated the nature of meditation, knowledge, now the sutrakara means the author of the sutra. The sutra, the person who writes it, is a sutrakara. So Patanjali is the sutrakara, the kara, like ahamkara, the kara, the doer of the sutra, the writer of the sutra. So then now the Sutrakara begins to consider the fruits of meditation. The scriptures state that after the attainment of knowledge of Brahman, the destruction of previous sins and the non-clinging of subsequent sins will result with regard to the meditating devotee. So and later on he'll talk about the 3 kinds of karma. So meditation destroys our previous karma, my friends, burns it. And it takes away our inclination to create more karma. What does that mean? What does it mean? It means it removes our desires. What causes us to make karma? Desires for the fruits to enjoy. So real meditation, how do you tell if you're meditating purely and properly, or do your yoga is working for you? Very simple. Your litmus test is desires will decrease. No magic, no mysticism. That's it. So he just says it here. Look, what happens after the attainment of knowledge of Brahman? Destruction of previous sins. In other words, we don't even know what our previous sins are. We have no idea what we've done in previous lives, my friends. You think, oh, I'm such a nice person. Oh, I'm a yogi, yogini. Oh, I do. We have a clue. You could have been a mass murderer. You think we're no different from anybody else. We don't have no idea that your karma could slam you right in the face tomorrow. No idea. No way of knowing that. Just because you're all nice and cozy now and you get, and you cuddle your you cuddle your pussycat and you give them some money in donations and to charity, you have no idea what's lurking around the corner from the past. So that gets destroyed by meditation. Right. Now, the destruction of previous sins and the non-clinging of subsequent sins. That means this is the parabdha. We're going to find, if we do this next week, that's the past, and the parabdha karma, and the there's the parabdha, and then there's the not kriyamana. Gosh, my memory is just like shot today as it age. It'll come to me in a minute. That you're not making fresh karma. Because why are you not making fresh karma? Because you have no more desire, attachment to the fruits. The meditation shows the meditator the illusoriness of thinking you can find happiness through some material action, material object, material emotion, and material anything. You cannot find the satisfaction we crave. That's viveka. That's vidya. That's jnana. To see that plain, not just because it's written in some old Sanskrit book. To see it as plain as you see the fire in front of you, the fireplace. Right. So, and the non-clinging of subsequent sins means you've given up attachment will result. This is the result with regard to the meditating devotee. Please pay attention. What is the fruit of meditation? Not a ooey wooey feeling. The evaporation of desires, my friends. This is real yoga. No tingly little prana bouncing about nonsense. The removal of desire is the fruit of real yogic practice in the real Vedanta yogic pre-modern texts. Take it or leave it. This is it. So, the non-clinging, that means not attachment to the fruit, if we use Krishna's language in the Gita. The non-clinging of subsequent squid will result with regard to the meditating devotee. And then he gives his passages. As water does not wet the lotus leaf, right? A famous example also. The Gita uses exactly the same metaphor. Padma patram putram evam patram putram evam basa is the Gita's way. Same. Gita sometimes quotes the Upanishads. As water does not wet the lotus leaf, even so, no sins cling to him who knows this. Right? The lotus leaf is in the water, but the water, if you've seen the lotus leaf, it's kind of like waterproof. The drops just roll off it. Okay. So now quickly, last verse. Here the doubt arises, just this 2 paragraphs, whether or not these non-clinging and destruction results as the fruit of meditation. The opponent holds they will not result. So in other words, the opponent says that that the destruction of past karma and the removal of desire or clingingness in the present, that's not the fruit of meditation, says the opponent, and he quotes some scripture. and he quotes the Brahma Vivarta Purana, which says, no work which is not experienced will perish even after millions of aeons. Pay attention to this. The Brahma Vivarta is not talking about meditation. The opponent is misquoting it. But if you're not meditating, no work that you have done, meaning no act that you have done, the fruit of that will never perish, even if it takes 1,000,000 births for it to bear its fruit. It has to bear its fruit. The only way not to receive the consequences, we don't even know we have no idea what they are. The only way to do something about what horror stories we might have lurking in our karmic ashaya, the only way to do anything about that is destroy it through yogic practice. If we don't, then this verse is saying, the Brahma Vivarta verse is saying, let's read it again, another Purana, no work which has not been experienced yet, that fruit will not perish even after millions of yugas, is the Sanskrit, cycles of age. It has to bear fruit. There's only one way out of it, and that's to destroy it through yogic practice. So the opponent says that. The sutra refutes this view and says that on attaining meditation, non-clinging, which means that you stop making karma because you're no longer clinging. Remember the Gita, to plug this into chapter 2, right? Karma yoga, what is it? Right? Karma niyevad adhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana, don't be attached to the fruit. And then you go to the same place that the jnanis go, says Krishna, if you can give up attachment to the fruit. So that non-clinging, but also destruction of subsequent and previous sins. We can't just look, let's say we become yogis in this life. We don't know what we've got in our karma warehouse. We might have to suffer 1,000 lives. What if we were slave owners? What if we butchered animals? Every animal we butchered, we have to be butchered, my friends. We've all done all of that. So even becoming enlightened would be kind of useless, because if you've got to burn up all who knows how much karma. But yoga, no, but yoga burns it up. So this is another good reason to do yoga. It shouldn't be the real reason, but it's a sort of a good side effect of yoga. It burns that up. We don't even know what that is. That's stored. So the sutra refutes this view and says that on attaining meditation, non-clinging, and destruction of subsequent and previous sins will result, respectively, why? Through the greatness of knowledge as stated in the text. And then he quotes his verses, right? And now he brings in a bhakti note. The power of works, or simple, bad deeds, to produce results is nothing but the displeasure of the Lord. And we've got to do the verse next week about, I don't know what just happened. Ishvara oversees karma. Oh, we lost it. Doesn't matter, we're done. But anyway, we should do that. We should end on a nice bhakti note. That would be a nice bridge to Sisi. What verse was that? 13. How do we end up down there? 13. Is nothing but the displeasure of the Lord. The Bhagavan oversees karma. Eleonora, remind us to, please, if you don't mind, begin next week with karma being overseen by Bhagavan. So the meditation on the Supreme Person, notice Ramanuja bringing in bhakti now, is really a closet bhakta, and he's been very, very reserved and very faithful to the text itself, but he's a raging bhakta. I'm sure he's as frustrated as I am with the Vedanta Sutra not allowing him to give rein to his devotion to Bhagavan, but when he can, he slips it in, and here he's got a chance. The meditation of the Supreme Person. Why? Because Ishvara controls karma. I really respect Ramanuja because he's not bringing in his bhakti if the text doesn't talk about it. And there's not a lot of bhakti in the Vedanta Sutra. And I really respect that he's really followed the dharma of the Vedantin. He hasn't brought in unwarranted passages from other texts. When in his own writing, if you read what he writes, not a commentary on something else, the Vedanta Sara, the Vedanta Sagra, oh my God, it's all bhakti. It's nothing other than Narayan and the beautiful form and his beautiful majesty. But here, very reserved, but when he gets a chance, a legitimate chance, he's not taking liberties with the text. The text is about karma, destroying karma. Later on in the text, it's going to say Ishvara oversees karma. So he's got a legitimate link to Ishvara because he's talking about karma. So if Ishvara oversees karma, then he's making the obvious next step here that if you meditate on that Ishvara who oversees karma, then Ishvara destroys that displeasure. Displeasure means bad karma because Ishvara is overseeing karma. So therefore, when Ishvara's displeasure, we call that bad karma. But why don't we call it Ishvara's displeasure? You could. He's calling it Ishvara's displeasure because he's the overseer of karma. So bad karma, then Ishvara is displeased. So the meditation on the Supreme Person destroys that displeasure, which has produced by sins, right? Why is Ishvara produced? Because sins, we're inflicting violence on other creatures, Ishvara's creatures. We inflict violence on Ishvara's creatures, then Ishvara is displeased with that. And then we get karma. It comes back to us. It's not just some whimsical God whimsically meting out punishment. No, it's a law. You inflict suffering on this one, right? You get that same suffering. So we know how it works. We're not dependent on the whimsy of some genocidal God. It's very structured and cause and effect. So the meditation on the Supreme Person destroys that displeasure, which has been produced by sins committed by the meditator. Nobody else to blame, my friends. Okay, questions? Next week we do we'll do the 4.4, the last chapter of the Vedanta Sutra, which is the grand finale. And we'll see that your liberation consists of with a body or without a body, but not a material body. Saguna, Nirguna, Brahman. We're going to have to introduce 2 new terms. Any questions?
Edwin?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the best time to meditate? It's an hour and a half before or after?
Before the sunrise. Before.
What about at night? Before the sun sets?
Oh no,
it doesn't.
No, that doesn't. It's only that one time.
Oh, okay.
But the Vedanta says you can do it at any time. But if your question is which is the most ideal time, it's the
yes.
No, that's the Brahma. There's only one Brahma Muhurta, and that's what you said.
An hour and a half before.
Yes, more or less, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome, Sylvia. Tim.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering how these 2 commentaries compare to all the other commentaries on the Brahma Sutras.
I mean, you have a big divide between the Vaishnavas and Shankara. So there is a popular saying, I don't know if you like it or not, but the 5 fingers of the hand appear different, but when it comes to Shankara, they form one fist. So the 5 Vaishnava commentaries all oppose Shankara's idea because they're not going to accept somebody saying that their beloved Bhagavan is illusion. They don't care about you want to say the world is illusion. In a sense, you could say that because after all, if you're absorbed in pure consciousness, you're not aware of the world. Now, whether it was there in the first place or was never there in the first place is kind of redundant if you're in the state of samadhi. So that's not so important that that you're going to waste a fifth of your commentary. Ramanuja dedicates to rejecting Shankara, 20% of his commentary. They're not going to do that just because Shankara says the world was never there in the first place. I mean, you might reject that, but it's really if you try to say that our beloved Bhagavan is illusion and our individuality is illusion and bhakti, our beloved relationship with Bhagavan is illusion, then we're gonna respond to that very, very forcefully.
But do any of them sort of break down the delineation between Atman and Brahman in a different way than these 2 do?
No. Yeah. Yes, they all have their different nuances, but the essential divide is between some kind of difference. Now, the Dvaitins emphasize that difference much more radically. The Dvaita school, Ramanuja's is Vishishta Dvaita. And he would say that, it's kind of like oneness with differences within it. Madhva doesn't like that. He thinks he thinks if you have a oneness with differences, then the suffering in the soul is somehow going to seep over into Brahman. He feels it's that kind of a model is a bit too close. He has radical dualism. There's eternal distinction, radical distinctions between the soul and God, between one soul and another soul, the Panchabheda, the 5 differences. So Madhava is going to emphasize difference much more. But I would say it's more of a matter of emphasis between the Vaishnava traditions. And if there is a major difference, it is in the Ramanuja and Madhava. Vishnu is the supreme causal being. And Krishna is the incarnation of Vishnu. Whereas in the Krishna Vedantin traditions, and there's 3 major ones, Krishna is the supreme being. And Vishnu is a secondary expansion that expands from Krishna in order to create. But Krishna doesn't create, because that's a job. If you say God is the creator, then you've kind of trapped God into a sort of dharma. His dharma is creator. Now you can say, well, he's free to do it or not to do it, but the fact is it's a kind of like something he has to do every 8 billion years, and then he's kind of like no. The Krishna tradition says no, Krishna just engages in love and just beautiful, joyous exchange with his bhaktas. He doesn't have a job to do. So when there's creation to be done, he just manifests Vishnu out of his being, and Vishnu goes and does the creation. There's a whole range of different Vishnus. I mean, I'm just, once you get into these traditions, we're just talking about very, very basic categories, but there are all kinds of different schematizations. So that's another difference, that the Krishna traditions, for them, Krishna is the supreme. That would be the 16th century Vrindavan traditions that I often refer to. There's 2 main ones, and then there's an older Krishna tradition called Vishnu Swami. But other than that, I would just say emphases, and they all oppose, seriously, they're radically different from Advaita. There's a massive gulf there. But on one side of the gulf, the Vaishnavas, there's not that much difference philosophically. And they all respect each other, and they all have but they respect Shankara. They think he was a great being, but they have to defend their beloved Bhagavan. That's their love, that's their beloved. So therefore they get in that, there's a very strong response to what they call Mayavad. Mayavad is what they call Advaita, because Advaita says everything is Maya, including Ishvara Bhakti, the individual soul. It's all Maya, it's all illusion, it's not real, there's only Brahman. So therefore everything is Maya.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Pasha.
I do apologize if you have explained this before, but I had IT issues beforehand. I wanted to ask, what is the definition of meditation? Just because there's so many different definitions and approaches to meditation. Some say it's contemplation, some say it's being in the moment, some say it's listening to particular sound, some say it's just silencing your mind. And I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on this.
Well, I would follow the Vedanta and the Yoga Sutras, both of them, where meditation is the continuing direction of the mind through willpower on the object of concentration. So you have an object of concentration, and you channel the mind, and you do not allow the definition. I think there's a beautiful verse in the Gita. I'll tell you the Sanskrit, and then we can go online and try to find the actual verse number. Yata nischarati. Yata nischarati manas chanchalamastheram tatastato niyamyetad atmanyeva vasham nayat. Wherever the mind wanders, yata nischarati, chara, wherever it wanders, manas, the mind, yata nischarati manas, chanchalam asthiram, this mind is chanchalam, always going, and it's asthiram, right? Yoga, the asana is stiram, but the mind is asthiram. It's never fixed. It's always wandering. So wherever it wanders, from that place, bring it under the niyam, like the niyamas, From that place, control it. Atmaneva Vasham, bring it back under the control of the self. So that's meditation. It's the conscious with effort. Patanjali says yatna, abhyas is yatna. It's an effort, tatra stito, to keep it fixed there. What's the tatra there? So yatna, tatra stito, you have to have an effort, tatra stito, to keep it there. What's the there? Your object of meditation. So if you're an Atman seeker, your object of meditation is Atman, and you can focus the mind on Om, for example, because Om is Brahman, and Atman in some sort of way is either a part of Brahman with Ramanuja, or, but there's a connection between Atman and Brahman, and therefore Om. Gandhi says Om. The Bhaktas are not really interested in Om, because even though Om is Ishvara, it's not really, it's like a seed. You don't really know, it's not very personal, it's not manifesting its beautiful qualities. The Bhaktas are in love with the beautiful qualities of Ishvara, not just sort of this Om, this impersonal Om, which has no qualities at all. It doesn't even have sound qualities. It's one phoneme. How minimalistic is that? My goodness, that's about as minimalistic. It's like theologians who say God is some kind of a simple point. So Bhaktas are, much prefer these more developed mantras like Om Namo, Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So meditation then, to answer the question, is to keep the mind fixed on an object, rolling, because the mind is never actually still. We talk about Nirodha actually as being rhetorical. There isn't actually any Nirodha. Because nothing is still in Prakriti. Gunas are always moving. So then the sattva, the mind is so sattvic that it's focusing the mind on its object, and depending on the school, and that's going to be a different kind of, but that's what meditation is. Dhyana, keeping the mind fixed.
And can I ask one more question, Edwin? Would you agree that Vedanta is a Vaishnava theological articulation, just because aside from Shankaracharya, everyone else seems to be Vaishnava oriented, and even with Shankara himself, he would say, worship of Vishnu is sattvic, worship of Shiva is tamasic, so therefore it's not recommended. And why is it explicitly or implicitly Vaishnava when it comes to Vedanta?
I would agree that it's explicitly a Vaishnava. Shankara is a Vaishnava, no question, except for him, Vaishnavism occurs in the lower level of mirage and illusion, but within that level, to the extent the world is real, of course it's not, but to the extent that it has any reality, then there's a creator, and that creator is Vishnu. So he's definitely a Vaishnava. As far as I know, there's only ever been one Shaiva commentary on the Vedanta. I don't even know who that is. I might be wrong, but I seem to remember somewhere a reference to one not very well known. And what does that mean, not very well known? Nobody quotes it. When I say the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, no one's heard of it. What do I mean? In the massive gamut of Sanskrit literature, and not just the text, but the commentaries and commentaries and commentaries and commentaries and secondary, if something's never mentioned in any of that, it means it wasn't known to intellectuals from the north and the south and the west and the east. So that's what I mean. That's what we mean when we say that something like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika might have been a couple of Shakta traditions up in the Himalayas might have known it. So to just channel that into what you're saying, there's only ever, so why is it a Vaishnava enterprise? Vaishnavism is actually dominant philosophically. I mean, there are, sophisticated Shaiva manuals in Kashmir Shaivism. People like Abhinavagupta, brilliant. I mean, they're great. One of the great minds of India. I'm not saying there's not an intellectual body of knowledge, but it seems like for whatever reasons, Vishnu goes back to the oldest text, that Vishnu is the sacrifice, going back to the Vedas, that Vaishnava, that Vishnu, Yajna, something Yajna Vishnu, the Vishnu is the Yajna. So there seems to be an association with Vishnu and the Yajna in very early texts. There's very early Vaishnavas in the Vaikanasas. There's ancient, way before any Shaivism surfaces in literature. Well, I'm not sure about that. But there are references. Obviously, the Shvetashvatara is a Shaiva Upanishad. the Shvetasvatara, it doesn't mention Shiva, but it says Rudra and Hara, which are two names that are associated with Shiva. So we do have the Shvetasvatara clearly. The Mahabharata is primarily Vaishnava. The Ramayana is totally Vaishnava. Not that Shiva doesn't play important roles, but the text overall accepts Narayana as the supreme. So I guess the answer is Vaishnavism is ultimately dominant in terms of who the ultimate entity is. I mean, Shiva's everywhere. The Shiva's in the, in all the Puranas, and he's in the Mahabharata, and he, fights with Arjuna. I'm not saying, and he's clearly Ishvara, but I think the answer would have to be that when it comes to like who is the all ultimate beings, and I'm not saying the Shaktas don't fit this around, of course they do. There are Shakta traditions that say Shiva is the ultimate causal being, but in terms of the most prominent notion, it seems to be Vishnu is the supreme being. So I don't know if that doesn't answer your question. I don't think it's an answer to your question. I don't think anyone can say this is the reason why all the entire Vedanta tradition is Vaishnava. Other than to say it seems to have been dominant. It still is dominant in India. If you took all the Vaishnavas and the Ramanandis, it is definitely dominant. But there is no answer to your question, Pasha, other than what I just said.
Interestingly, in the old Javanese recension of the Mahabharata, after Arjuna is done wailing, Krishna says Namah Shivaya, and then he starts the Gita.
He says Mama Shivaya?
Namah Shivaya.
Namah Shivaya.
Because Hinduism in Java and Bali is predominantly Shaivite.
Yeah, so I mean, and the same thing, I mean, they all have their variants and sub-variants, and I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. It is what it is, yeah. And the Vedanta is definitely a Vaishnava enterprise.
Thank you, Edwin. I'm sorry to miss your last session in 2 weeks' time. I'll be in an African safari, so I won't be able to join.
Oh, you're not going to kill any animals, I hope.
Hopefully they won't kill me.
They
I think
won't
that's
kill
the more.
you. All right. So, well, we'll enjoy that and have a great safari.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, my friends? Cece, how are you, Cece? This evening, do we have a plan for the problem we had last time?
Yes, I hope it works now.
Okay. Did any of the prisoners get books? Did you start buying them books?
Not yet. They're the guy who was going to find them is to buy them.
Yeah.
Is doing that, but
okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, good. Welcome. Thank you for staying up.
Thank you. Well, I invited my daughter to sing with us today.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Isabella.
Oh, is Isabella, right?
Yes.
Hi, Isabella. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
Yes. Do you sing like your mum?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Oh, that means you both sing beautifully then. Well, welcome. We're lots of friends here from all over the world. So mostly America, but who knows? And welcome. It's great you joining us. We're happy to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll make a small test.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
I'm sorry?
Yes, it sounds fantastic.
Great.
Yay, we got it.
They're muted.
Cece, it's my fault. I'm sorry. Can you unmute yourself? I have no idea what I did. I'm so sorry. It was going so low.
Edwin, go to participants and unmute Cecilia.
I don't know how
Well,
to do
she's
that.
there.
It doesn't give
Yeah,
me the option. It doesn't give me the. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Cece. It was my fault.
No, don't worry. It's okay.
Okay.
It was very beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Isabella, Isabella, you're doing amazingly.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So, juntas. Sorry. go to sleep if you want to go to sleep. It's 11 at night over here. So
Bye. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Isabel. That was amazing. Was that your first care time with your mum?
Yes.
I
it
think you
was.
make a great duo. I hope you do more.
Thank you.
Well, we'll come back next time. We all invite you.
Thank
That was
you
very
so
beautiful.
That was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Isa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama Rama
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you, Cece. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always. Beautiful. And thank you for bringing your daughter. Yeah,
Thank
you make a great deal. So, you know, we're not meeting next week, the week after. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes.
So good night, and good night to everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
See, it's so beautiful. Such a wonderful way of ending.
Thank you, Edwin.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.